Thanks, Grim. How's everyone doing? This is our February 8th Dwarf Day. Been the normal amount of time since the last one. Try to do them around months or so. And on this Dwarf Day, we are multi-plane drifting. So I'm going to go ahead and get through the agenda real quick, and you guys can see what you're in for. We're going to do some community updates. Then we're going to check out Foundations, the one card, and Aetherdrift, a bunch of cards. Then we're going to talk about our tournament experience from the 8K Rumble, me, Show, and Rust. And then we're going to talk about the Magdanomicon updates and compare that to the update, or compare that to the deck list of BAUSMTG, who BAUSMTG just won the 10K at the AGL.
Yep.
And then we're gonna just do open Q&A, and then we'll release you for the day, as it were. So I'm gonna start with some our written in stone community updates. The November Dwarf Day giveaway has been fully done. I have one person's cards, but they live local, so I'll be handing those over to them personally at some point. But thanks for everyone's patience. Sorry that took so long. Shipping was a nightmare in every step of the way. We'll be doing more giveaways in the future, but probably giving myself some time to breathe and work through the trauma of the USPS has inflicted on me. We have updated the server a small amount. We have two new sections. That's the coaching and tutoring and the merchant square. Coaching and tutoring is the rebranding of the Friday Night Forging. For lack of a better word, we found the moniker Friday Night Forging very attractive, but the constraint of having Friday nights and Saturday mornings more or less spoken for a long time, or I guess indefinitely, was just it didn't work for us, and we didn't do it as consistently as we would have liked to. So we just restructured the system in which in a way where it would be more pickup and more considerate of people internationally, and not people that play Magic on Friday nights, because that's what you're supposed to do.
Hey Drew, I don't want to. I don't think you have the video going.
What's that? Oh yeah, I don't have the video going. It's fine. I'm you. My bad, guys. It's all good. I'm talking through the entire thing. We're all good. So yeah, the coaching and tutoring stuff is the same as it was before. It's just everything is on the server. Everything is in that forum down there, and it's easy to access. It's not sequestered on a Google form off the site, which is what we prefer. Everyone seems to like when stuff is all together. So the other thing that we added to the server is the merchant square, and that's a little bit newer. What it amounts to is we are folding in the artisan section where all the artists that are on the server can like hawk their stuff and organize commissions from people on the server into a spot where people can like reach out to artists on behalf of multiple people, like coordinate artist proof purchasing, card signing, commissioning people like Gold Sabertooth and other artists to get stuff made and going in together and pouring money together to do that. It's just kind of an organizing and artist self-promotion section. We have artists. We like artists. We like to give them better ways to be more visible to people. So I highly recommend if you are, if you're someone who regularly goes out and reaches out to artists, say, hey, I want to get these cards signed, or I want to purchase an AP from you, and it's like they're not an artist that just has a storefront, and it's easy to do. Maybe consider tossing a post up and saying, hey guys, I talked to this artist, they have this many of this card, who would like to buy some. I know I'll be doing that in the future because I like getting Dwarves bling. It's probably my favorite thing about this community is the bling and the Dwarves. Uh, um, so I went back through um, EDH top 16 and cut it off by 3 months, so roughly the bans, and our conversion rate went from like 30 something percent to around 21 or 18 for the last 3 months. So we're not doing as amazingly as we had been back in early fall, late summer, but we're still doing okay. We're still in like the top 10 in terms of conversion rate. But it does mean we need to collectively suck less and throw less, and I mean mostly me, because my showing at the Rumble was not good for our number. Just to shout out some dwarves that made the top cut. Boss obviously won the AGL CSS down in Atlanta, and we'll be talking about his list later on. I don't know if Alejandro. Do we know who Chad is? I'm so bad at attaching names to.
Epitaya.
What's that?
Epitaya.
All right, thank you. Did you spell that?
They're not. They're just known as Chad on the server now.
Okay, cool.
Like they changed their name.
Oh, cool. All right, well, congratulations to Chad for that top cut, and obviously to BAUSMTG. He got 10th at the AGL as well. And if you guys listen to the Striking Gold, we talked to them for 3.5 hours. It was a very good conversation. It was just a very long one. There's a lot of good stuff. A couple things I wanted to shout out when we about the art stuff. Snowballin is selling Chad. I always have a hard time pronouncing it. Chagda playmats, and they're fun and goofy. And he has like 7 left. So if you're interested in another Magda playmat, he still has some, and the link is there in the. There you can find him at Snowballin 26 on Etsy. The other thing is, this is more of just like a PSA than anything. This is definitely free to do. Jesper has a deflecting SWAT secret lair, or he has a secret lair that features his deflecting SWAT. It is he's doing some sort of giveaway related to it. I believe he's giving away some sort of like the art of the painting. What you have to do is you have to email him sometime between the 10th and the 17th with a list of all the Easter eggs in the art, which there are 30. Some excellent dwarves have already like compiled the majority of those into a big long list in the thread in the Merchant Square area of the server, and it's basically let the dwarves that are interested in it do the work for you, but you can still send the email in and get entered into the raffle and draw. I believe there's also 5 foil secret lair packs coming with it, so there's potentially a foil deflecting SWAT from Jesper in the as well. So that's something that you guys could do. It's free. Just wanted to. I'm leaving this up here for posterity, but the Striking Gold is embedded. It's already live. It's in the announcements already. It's a long one, so I went through and did chapters because it needed it. All right. Anyone have anything they need to say about community updates or anything the community before we move on to cards?
Nope.
All right.
Go team.
All right.
Go team.
All right. So, Fresh from the Mind's going to be pretty quick this year, I find. Or this Dwarf Day. We have one card from Foundations, and that is Soulstone Sanctuary. I'm not convinced this card is phenomenal, but for those listening, it is a land, colorless land, taps for colorless. It has an ability that says 4. This land becomes a 3/3 creature with vigilance in all creature types. It's still a land, so it's a Mutavault. It's an expensive Mutavault. Um, but I'm not sure that 4 mana is the amount of mana we want to be holding up, especially if this is one of the 4 mana, because you have to tap it before it becomes a creature. The beauty of Mutavault is you just animate it and then tap it for mana. It's effectively free, as long as it's not doesn't have summoning sickness. This doesn't really get you don't get that as time 4 times the cost to do so. It's permanent, but like it's a really high upfront cost.
Yeah, one of the big issues that I was running into it was that, like, with the meta, the way that it currently is, with everybody just trying to win over top of one another, I would tap low to animate the thing, and then in response to it just becoming a creature, they would, like, oh, flash in, Valley Flood Caller, or, cast Born Upon a Wind. And it's a rough time to be tapping low on mana right now.
Yeah. Did you ever try this show?
No, I never tried it because I didn't think that the 4 mana was something that was viable, even if it included itself. I thought that it was kind of a little bit magical Christmas land where you're in the mid game where it's going to matter. The fact that it is another Mutavault was pretty good, but I didn't think that like we necessarily needed it, and it's a colorless land, and I prefer my mulligans to be stronger.
Yeah, I think that was largely my reasoning as well. It's like it's not worth losing a good utility land or a red source. And certainly not worth cutting a spell. Yeah, so let's move on to the main event, main drag, if you will.
I see what you did there.
Overview set name. We have a couple more cards in here than this one.
We could just delete that at a post.
Yep, I'll add that later. So, so we have Aetherdrift. We have about like 7 cards, 8 cards to talk about. There's some cards that we didn't even bother mentioning because they're red cards, they're vehicles or mounts, but they're just so bad that they don't count. They're not worth it. So
Mount is very importantly not instant speed. So
yes,
the fact that I mean, do we have Ghoda as one of the things that we're going over? I forget.
yeah, I believe we are talking about Ghoda. It's
Okay,
like
I'll
the
shut
only
up
one
then.
that's a 2-drop. Like
Yep.
it ticks a couple boxes, but not nearly enough.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So Aetherspark, they debated as friends. R and Dwarf was like, oh, you want a fetchable planeswalker? There might be a protection piece or something. No, we didn't get that. We got a legendary artifact planeswalker equipment that says as long as it's attached to a creature, it can't be attacked, and has whenever equipped creature deals combat damage during your turn, put that many loyalty counters on the Aetherspark. It has a +1 to attach it to one target creature. Put a 1/1 on that creature. -5. Draw 2 cards. -10. Add 10 mana of any one color. And it has a base loyalty of 4. So if you're counting, you can neg 5 it on your turn if you swing with the creature. No, you can't. None of the same. You have to attach it first. It's really bad, friends. It's a generic pile of value but like the pile's like really small, more like a mound,
A mound of value.
a tiny mound of value. Like there's a curvature to the ground at which the value is on, and it's not a very tall one, right? It just Russ was telling us that it was really good and limited.
Okay, so seeing how well it performed in limited is making me reconsider the card. I'm actually going to be playing it in a tournament for tomorrow, just to kind of see how it does. Because I think at least for the mid-range like build of the deck, there's a distinct lack of valuable tutor targets. Because a lot of the times people have an answer for you, and they will just fire it off no matter what. So I think it's valuable to have kind of something that fits the spot of protection, card draw, and mana advantage. Because I understand that the -5, -10, they look pretty big, but I'm telling you, you can get that thing to activate every single turn. Which I'm not saying it's going to be good, but I'm reconsidering it after seeing what it can do. I also like that, like, one, it is tutorable, and then two, it is kind of, like you said, protection against Orcish Bowmasters. Then it also does kind of have some good synergies with Agatha Soul Cauldron too. So I'm not entirely off of this one.
Okay.
Now, after Sunday, let's see if this if this stays the same.
Yeah, This is hopium, in my opinion, and I hope I'm wrong, but because I like more reasonable cards to include. But at 4 mana, I could be winning the game, right? And this ain't it for me. Anything else, Joe?
Not really. I mean, the -10 isn't very useful for our deck outside of situations where like you have portal stuck in your hand or GPS stuck in your hand or something of that nature. But like those
Nexus.
things do happen, and if you do manage to get to 10, it's feasible. But my problem with uh this particular card is that it only gives +1/+1 rather than the Omni, whatever it's called, that gives you +1/+1 for each artifact that you
Luxior?
have. Whatever it, no, it's from the new set. And yeah, so like it giving you two cards the turn after it comes down is cool, but depending on what you're actually attacking with, like that creature doesn't gain indestructible, right? So it's if you put it on Magda, you're 2-for-1ing yourself. If you're, it's I don't know. It's one of those things where to me, you need a very much a wider board state where you can continually get your dwarves chump blocked because they're just not going to want to give you cards every couple turns or every like 2 turns or whatever.
Yeah. I also think like that the -10, you're just like, why not Nexus of Becoming if you're worried about that? You just
Uh,
trying to cheat, you know?
yeah, but this isn't really something that you would tutor all that often to me, right?
Right.
It's one of those things that comes from hand, and Nexus of Becoming is also 6 mana. So you run into the problem of if you're tutoring that to put a GPS or whatever into play, like it's not great. And that's one of the main reasons that we're also off of it,
Right,
is
right.
because like the big upside to it is, well, what if I get Maskwood Nexus or Clock of Omen stuck in my hand? I can just play it uncounterably. The problem is it then becomes a 3/3 that they can just Swords to Plowshare. And you've exiled your card, and now you don't have access to your win condition anymore. Like, it doesn't go to the graveyard that you can just go and get it with Barkform Harvester. There is large inherent risk to taking plays like that.
Sure.
So, like, you need to find your own window, and it's on top of the fact that it needs to be during your own combat.
Right.
So, like, it really limits when your opponents have to pay attention and hold up interaction. So like, I don't know. It's to me, it's almost win more, and you're better off just leaving the thing in your hand and finding another way to win.
Agreed.
Or trying to find that opportunity to be like, okay, I'm going to jam the Mascot or the clock anyway.
All right. Press on to the next. Boommobile. I thought we hated the dragon. The Realm Scorcher, yeah. So Boommobile is a 2 red artifact vehicle. Its power and toughness is 5 and 5. Vehicle enters, add 4 mana to any one color. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. It has an exhaust ability of X, 2, and a red. This vehicle deals X damage to any target. Put a 1/1 counter on this vehicle. So, playing this on curve, you get to do 1 damage, which is not exciting. It's just not good for 4 mana. That's not what we want to be doing with 4 mana. Not even close.
There's not enough hard stacks like that. This comes in and kills Oof, or this comes in and kills like or Doorkeeper Thrall or whatever. It's just not something that happens, and this still can't kill Oof, obviously, because Exhaust is an activated ability of an artifact. So, like, the board states where this is going to come down and kill the Dryneth or kill the Oppo or whatever. It's Magical Christmas Land. This being a 5/5 for 4 is not good enough. It's a good limited bomb, but outside of that, like, it's just garbage.
Yeah, no. Just Russ, do you have any like hot take of why we should be jamming this in every list?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
I'm crackhead. I'm not dumb.
That's fair.
Put that on like Tombstone.
Yeah, so Burner Rocket. It is a 1 red, 3/1 artifact vehicle. It's got flash. When it ETBs, it gives target creature you control +2/+0 and trample until end of turn, and it's got crew 1. So it's a lot of good text in this card. Flash is awesome. Crew 1 is good, but not really relevant. 2 would have been fine. And the buff is not like great either, because we really only care about Magda's toughness most of the time.
The only time it's really good is when you're playing Gimli.
Right, but
But that's sort of win more at that point.
yeah, no, Gimli's already doing his thing if he's getting through. The real reason that we're not on it right now is because it plays very poorly into boards where you're trying to gotcha with a Bowmaster on the board and trying to go over top or something, because they can also just kill this after it's activated. It's just not it's not a very safe vehicle. And for 2 mana, you want something that's a little bit safer. You want something that's got more butt than Magda does, right? And that's just not where it's at.
Also, like, when you're playing this card, you very much need to have a red-heavy focus on your mana base. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of situations where this is uncastable, especially if you want to be holding up other things.
Right.
Having just like 1 red mana is very consistent in some builds of the deck. And you usually don't want to be spending that on like this flash vehicle. And while your opponent's not being able to count how many treasures you're going to make because the board state is already like cluttered, and you can't attack, and they're like, oh, he doesn't have a vehicle. The downside of this not really having any extra synergy whatsoever, like Mobile Garrison has or Mobile Homestead has at the same mana value, is another reason why this card isn't all that great. Because if you're swinging with Mobile Garrison, you're able to untap your One Ring, untap your Mana Vault, make another treasure for the turn. Mobile Homestead can ramp you over time,
Yeah.
or at least give you information as to how you can plan out your next turn. It's like Drew said, just not good enough because it's a 3/1. It can never attack.
Yeah.
Unless you have Lifecraft Engine out, in which case well, you're attacking with it because it's going to make a treasure, and there's still a good chance that this just gets chunk blocked anyway.
Why would you attack? You have Lifecraft Engine. Just animate
Exactly.
this,
That's
animate
the whole
this,
point.
and then it doesn't do anything. The card doesn't have anything going on aside from the fact that it has flash, and that may not be good enough.
It may be good enough because flash is the most important keyword in the current meta. Like Russ
Right.
talked about earlier, people flashing in Valley Flood Collar trying to go off on top of things, but it's very difficult to like find the one situation where someone's like, I'm gonna flash in Valley Flood Collar, and you're like, ha, gotcha, burner rocket, I'm gonna make the treasures, and then I'm gonna win on top of you, attempting to give yourself flash for everything else.
Right. Counter Born Upon the Wind is not like exactly where we want to be.
I mean, if you think about it, there are very few situations, even when we have um, high speed hover bike, where it ever plays out like that.
Right.
So
yeah, this card. Think about this card. It's worse than High Speed Hoverbike. How often has High Speed Hoverbike done the thing that we're envisioning is the Christmas land for this card? And if it's almost never, do we want that at a worse mana rate, or worse body and a worse mana rate? And I think the answer is probably no. The 2 mana and the flash make it really solid in those aspects, but I just don't think they get it over the line. God, I'm gonna make more racing puns. That's fun. So let's move on to the next card. Dracosaur Auxiliary. We talked about this a little bit. It's just kind of sad. We saw Dragon, we saw Mount. We got excited, and then we got swerved on. It was particularly sad. I'll read it out for everyone. It's a 4 red creature dinosaur dragon mount for 4/4. It's got flying and haste, and whenever it attacks, while saddled, it deals 2 damage to any target. It's got saddle 3. That's honestly the thing that makes it really bad, on top of being a 6 mana, like, worse Sky Sovereign. Like, it's not nothing that these things are always creatures, but we just don't care often that it's not a creature unless we've crude, right?
there's like 3 or 4 decks total in the format that run Null Rod right now. So like it's not something that really comes up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this card is just too expensive. 2 damage is actually relevant in the not good enough, right? It's the reason we don't run Delayed Blast Fireball as often as we do is because it's 2 instead of 3, right? If it was 3 damage to everything our opponents control, it would be gangbusters. That's why Sky Sovereign is actually pretty okay in certain builds, is because it kills practically anything you need it to that's relevant, aside from like Big Pig and Lanbala. And this card does 1 less, and that 1 less could be really relevant. And Saddle 3 is just not good enough. Also, Curse Totem is more common than Null Rod. So, you're actually, mount cards are actually more of a liability than in like a building up a board state situation of treasures than Null Rod would be, which is kind of awkward. You'd think Mount would be like back when we were on Null Rod and we were considered it like a core element of the deck. We thought when OTJ came out, awesome, some saddle cards, more Blood Boilers, and then Mount got spoiled as a sorcery speed mechanic, and we were like, not so great. That's probably how all Mount cards are going to be going forward. It's going to have to be really pushed and really stupid and really cheap for us to consider it in the realm of like solid colorless vehicles that we can play off a Soul Ring or a Ancient Tomb. Anything else on Dracosaur?
Nope.
Moving on. Gastal Thrillroller. Seagrim. We didn't leave you out. So it's a 2 and a red artifact vehicle, 4/2. That's relevant. With trample, haste, and when it enters, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. Does anyone find it weird that we got literally the worst text as like the the things that red cares about in the vehicle set. Making it a creature is something that Magda could not care less about.
So it's Magda specific that doesn't care about it, but like Red Deck Wins definitely cares about it being a
Right.
3-mana 4/2.
Don't get me
Right?
wrong. I get that for like a limited and standard environment. Totally makes sense. It's just really funny that the self-animating vehicles are all in the colors where we do not care about that. So it's got Crew 2. But the interesting ability on this card is 2 and a red, discard a card, return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. So this card's got very little text on it that we care about. Crew 2 is good, but 3 mana is not. 4/2 is, we don't like trading down vehicles in general. We like our things to have bigger butts than our dwarves, and ideally bigger butts than their powers, because we don't care about the damage they do. It just trades down. It's really important. Really unfortunate that it trades down, and it's also a 3-drop that you can't that you have to have a red for. So there's, Show explained it to me better yesterday, so I want to talk about the discard, the way in which it helps you break through some sort of
It doesn't. Like, it only does it on your own turn.
right, yeah.
That's the problem. Like, if you're looking to win at instant speed without Spine of Isha, and which we'll probably go over a little bit later. I actually have a board state I brought up for that.
Beautiful.
But when you need to do that, it's at instant speed. And if this was at instant speed, it coming in as a creature would actually be beneficial because you could kill it, put it into the graveyard, and then use the discard a card to force a card into the graveyard that you needed. Usually it would be Barkform Harvester to then allow you to give Barkform's ability to something else with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and then continue from there. But
Even itself, actually.
Right. So it's a very awkward situation.
Yeah, we kind of already have better ways of doing that thing on our turn anyway, to where this doesn't really place.
It's just not good enough.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
It's a good limited card. It's an okay card in standard probably because of the trample. But because it has 2 toughness, it's just, even in those situations, like without the finality part of it to have it come back in later, it's still probably not good.
Yeah. They fixed this card in a lot of ways. I think Wizards just generally was pretty scared of. I don't know. This set feels like if you had not made a lot of the mistakes they made with Kaladesh, which was a pretty dark time for bad designs making it out of the gate. Feels like a lot of stuff is safer than it was. Than it was back. Right. No, 7 years ago. So let's move on to the next. Gilded Ghoda. This is like, it's a 1 in a red for a creature horse mount, 2/2. Whenever it attacks while saddled, create a treasure token, saddle 1. That's a lot of really solid text in a sane world. We might even like it. But it's slow. It's you have to attack. It has to make it, right? Having to attack with a 2/2 means that too many things are going to trade, and that's just not going to be good enough. 1 treasure token for a thing that doesn't have haste, that can only be crewed on the turn it comes in during your turn when you have priority on stack sorcery speed. That's not good either, because people can respond to that more readily. They they know you're going to be basically playing heads up on your turn with this thing as your crewer. That's not a good thing to be. You kind of want to have that instant speed crew shenaniganery for other turns. That's that, and basically have to beg your opponent to be stupid or really like make some very tough decisions. Otherwise, the game has to be going in a very particular way for Gilded Ghoda to get in for more than one turn. And just play Careening Minecart or Mobile. Honestly, they're easier to cast, even though the one red does matter.
Yeah, I think if you want something like this effect, you probably just play Careening Minecart.
Yeah. And I think Careening Minecart is just kind of not strictly worse, but pretty much just worse than Mobile, because Mobile has.
I mean, Careening Minecart has the upside of not requiring Magda to be out. So while, yes, Mobile Garrison does have the upside of being a 3/4, as well as I can untap your One Ring and your Mana Vault, realistically, Careening Minecart does say help you make treasures to get Magda out over the next couple turns if you're mana fucked.
Sure. But that's also very slow.
It is very slow, but it does happen from time to time.
That's true.
I don't think that Careening Minecart is as bad as we have sort of made it out to be, but at the same time, vehicle slots over time, we haven't wanted to run as many. And when we talk about the next card, it may be reason to start thinking about running more cards like Careening Minecart or Mobile Garrison if you're not on them.
Speaking of, I should have put the gold one on here just to trigger some people. So Lifecraft Engine. This was the fifth card spoiled in the set ahead of spoiler season.
First card total.
No. The couple of the Gear Hulks came out before this card.
Really?
Yeah, the glass Gear Hulk and the other card. So it's a 3 mana.
4 cards before this.
Yeah, so it's Lifecraft Engine is a 3 mana, 3 generic mana artifact vehicle 4/4. As it enters because we don't use Battlefield anymore. You choose a creature type. Vehicle creatures you control are the chosen creature type in addition to the other types. Each creature you control of the chosen type, other than this vehicle, gets +1/+1, and it has crew 3.
Well, so, as this enters is different from when this enters.
As
this enters is right, but this is the replacement effect that you have with Roaming Throne and etc.
Yes.
Right. So there's a difference because we had just gone over cards with new text for the ETB, and it sounded like you were talking about that.
Well, you just say enters, and I was saying just ETB is no longer ETB; it's just E. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
So as this enters, is this a replacement effect? What is the?
It's the same thing as like a clone effect.
Yeah. So I don't know what that's called in the rules, but yeah. So it
is a replacement effect.
Okay, thank you. L1 over here doing the hard work. So yeah. So it's can't be shut off by Torpor Orb, same way with Roaming Throne. So that's relevant and important to keep in mind of. This card is all that in a bag of chips, man. It is just it's just
everything we could have ever wanted in our Christmas stocking.
Right. We didn't even write Santa for letters. We were like, no, it's too much. Santa can't make that happen. Like that. This is what that card is, right?
People gave me so much crap when I said that we were going to get a changeling vehicle, and that was the first thing that was given to us in a way.
Yeah, and this is how I want people to, I want people to count their blessings rather than, through the fact that there's that red was dog shit in this set, because dear lord,
this card is amazing.
This card is amazing. It is a 9 out of 10 easily. Best card we've gotten since Roaming lo and behold, it's a changeling thing.
Yep.
So really important. The crew 3 isn't real. It's actually crew 2. Don't let it trick you. As long as you have Magda out, all dwarves but armorer can crew it, which means you still get the iterative crewing of going stepwise and responding to removal or interaction. It pulls Magda out of Bowmaster range, at least off the initial ETB, which is nice. And if you have Torpor Orb, it's actually really hard to kill Magda with Bowmasters consistently, or any other dwarf for that matter. It also, and I think this is like, it's the most subtle aspect, but if you think back to games where you have your clown car on turn 0 and then you draw a mobile garrison or another 3-mana vehicle or high speed, and you're like, well, I wish this was a lightning bolt. Now it's a treasure. now all your vehicles are treasure generators. All of your vehicles are your A and your A plus B because they're now artifact dwarves. With crewing, you can do a crew chain of vehicles driving each other in a funny vehicle centipede. It just does literally everything you can want a vehicle to do. It's pretty phenomenal.
More importantly,
Yeah.
it is a lightning rod for removal and leaves Magda alive more often than not when I've been testing this card. Because as long as you let the crew resolve and it's a creature, people will get rid of this as opposed to Magda because it's just so powerful.
And what's fun about that is that people have to wait until it's a creature if they have creature only removal. That's another thing it has up over other. It's a double-edged sword. We'll talk about that in a second, but it does blank path until you crew it, right? And that means they have to play around that and wait for you to do it at someone's end step to get rid of it. Otherwise, they're just wasting tempo, right? It's an interesting force their hand kind of card. It's like what Lightning Greaves feels like when you consider it's an inflection point when it exists. They have to activate. They have to interact with the issue at the moment of equipping. In this case, it's at the moment of crewing. And Lightning Greaves, I didn't like it because it only did one thing. But with this, you're doing like 4 things effectively with your deck, and they have to hold up interaction for those inflection points and not develop if those 2 things run into conflict, whether answering this or developing their board, and that's a good thing for us. That's it's for those of you that were saying Gimli is a good lightning rod, this is a better lightning rod.
So, late teens had a question about like asking if it's reasonable to cut something like Mirror of the Forebears when getting this, because they're technically both artifact dwarves that are tutorable through Grafdigger's Cage, right?
Yep.
And the problem with removing cards like Mirror of the Forebears is you then remove your ability to do not Maskwood, but clockless lines with multiple copies of Roaming Throw and multiple copies of Zorn. And those do come up every so often.
Yep.
So unless you're specifically on Cursed Mirror, which still enables those lines, there's a very real deck building cost that you are sacrificing if you were to trade that out for Lifecraft Engine specifically.
Yeah, and that's really that leads to like the hey, what do I remove for this? Not
Right.
Mirror the Forebears. It's definitely it's sneakily one of the better Robo Dwarves because you can get it through grass and you can also do those lines. But also, I want to highlight how kind of mediocre some of the your 9th and 10th Robo Dwarfs are. that I wouldn't remove Mirror of the Forebears over those. I think Mirror of the Forebears is better than 3-Tree Mascot. Sorry, all of you that just got cool shiny versions of it. I want to find a way to put mine in too. But like Bloodline Pretender, there's just this feels like an upgrade in pretty much every way that you need.
Yeah, so like when we get to boss's list, if I were to upgrade his list with the new cards, like Bloodline Pretender would be what I change out for Lifecraft Engine personally. I don't think you need to be on even more artifact dwarves than he already was.
Yep. He's on the upper end because he was playing a Stax list and they like to draw into it naturally. No, not universal.
All right. And then we have one more card from this set.
Yep. Which is not nearly as good, but very good. Or potentially very good. I'll say that.
I mean, we have very few cards in the deck that win off of one single activation. And like one of the reasons why a lot of us were playing Academy Manufacturer was because the board state where it won was very consistent. You needed 2 untapped dwarves, an activation, and a vehicle, right? But this just needs an activation, a vehicle, and Magda. Because as long as you have an untapped creature at that point, you can activate to go get Mascot Nexus. Mascot Nexus comes in, makes everything into a dwarf. And then the way that this card works is it turns every time that you make a treasure into a treasure and a Thopter. So that Thopter will come in, be a dwarf that can be crewed to allow you to make another treasure and a Thopter. And that just goes infinite unless you're stuck under something like Blind Obedience or Manglehorn. So while this is like Battered Golem, insofar as that it's a single activation win in those board states, it doesn't play through the Stax pieces as well, or at all in these cases, but it does have the upside of I'm going to, in this case, without a tap outlet, make exponential growth like it's a Krenko.
Yeah.
And then during that process, you're also going to be making exponential growth for treasures. So this becomes a lightning rod for removal over Magda as well in a lot of situations.
Yep. It's a natural draw 3-drop that says, I'm going to win the game, you better kill it. And then all while you're still just making treasures with Magda. So I'm going to read the card out just for those of you that haven't read it. So Stridehangar Automaton is a 3 generic mana artifact creature construct that is a 1/4. It has Thopters you control get +1/+1, and the text: if one or more artifact tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying are created instead. That was just for making sure everyone knows what the card does. It is also just like a strangely efficient beatdown generator with Magda out. Like Show said, it is an exponential, like logarithmic. Like you start with 3, then you go to 6, then you go to 12, right? It just like turn over turn under like a Staxy in a Staxy situation. You're doing the Utvara thing with a much better card.
Right.
And it just works. It's a solid card. I don't think it's nearly as good as Lifecraft, but I think it actually it can win harder than Lifecraft under some board states because it doesn't require the thing with Lifecraft is it requires that you haven't already tapped all of your creatures before it becomes a Robo Dwarf. That was the double edged that I failed to mention before. Is that if you've tapped all of your creatures and you to something else, and Lifecraft is coming out after everything's tapped somehow, it's not a Robo Dwarf. It doesn't start your combo, and you can't that way. Whereas Stridehangar is, I guess Stridehangar is long. You have to have something to tap. So yeah, I guess you'll have your Thopter. So if you can get to Mascot with this out, you will have made a Thopter that turn, and you can then just win with your tapper.
You'll make a Thopter before the resolution of the original crew activation, so you can just crew again on top, and you'll never actually resolve a crew.
Right. Well, I wasn't
So
worried about
curse,
the creature. I wasn't. I mean, I get what you're saying, like the trigger.
but that's
resolves first.
important for curse totem
It
because
is. It
you're
is.
then able to make infinite creatures.
Yeah. Always remember that you do not have to let your vehicle become a creature. You can always just respond to the round of priority after the treasure trigger finishes. That's some good tech. Don't let anyone tell you your vehicle is now an artifact creature, because you control that. So I think that's the. Does anyone have any questions about this card or any extra thoughts? Right. This card is solid. It will win you games.
People are typing. Give them 2 seconds.
Does Stridehangar's printing add any value to Velis Veil?
If
No.
you're going up, if you're going up 1 or 2 vehicles, there is an argument for it. Because if you're going up 2 or 3 cards, then yes, I would say that there is an argument to where if you are playing a more turbo-oriented variant of the deck, that yes, that would be a good choice.
I would probably put Great Train Heist in before it because it works with more cards, right?
Great Train Heist makes you treasures. It doesn't turn your thing into a dwarf so that you can win the game with it.
In
That's
Blades,
true, but
Blades in
yeah,
my
that's
mind
true,
is a ritual because you're turning your robos into robo dwarves to then attack, not just turning my
That's
robos.
not how I see that card.
Okay, that's fair.
Blades also doesn't really do anything with Stridehanger because you turn Stridehanger into a dwarf, but the Thopters
Yeah, the
aren't.
Thopters aren't. But specifically, if you're going up vehicles, it's a better card. But in regards to Stridehanger itself, like Russ said, you're not making your Thopters into dwarves.
Okay, Rajantar wanted us to talk about the vehicle becoming a creature. So the way it works is you have a creature that with power enough to crew, or let's say you have 2 of them. You have a two 2/1s and a crew 2 vehicle. You tap 1 dwarf to the crew. You put the treasure creation trigger on the stack. You resolve that treasure creation trigger on the stack. The crew activation still has not finished. You have a round of priority. You tap the second dwarf to the crew. You then put the trigger for the treasure on the stack, and then you resolve that trigger. And the creature, the vehicle is still not a creature. Say you get 5 treasures at that point, or 6, whatever you need to win. You can go grab your clock or or whatever piece you need to win at that point, and your vehicle is still not a creature and still crewable, even in the situation where you have a curse totem, but you couldn't search with the curse totem out. You get what I'm saying? It's just the vehicle doesn't ever have to become a creature unless you need it to, or you're not doing anything at instant speed at that point. Oh man, professional facebreaker in Stridehanger is pretty nutty. That's pretty cool.
It is.
Yeah. We kind of got a layered build your own Winota thing going on, which is pretty cool. I think that's it on this card. It's just really
That's
good.
it on all the cards.
Yeah. Yep. So now we're going to talk about our. I almost wanted to rename this thing "Hitting Rock Bottom" because we have another striking gold that was actually a striking gold. But so for those of you that don't know,
quite a few of us went to the
Yeah.
8K in Massachusetts, the Royal Rumble.
Yep.
And it was Drew, Rust, myself, Eric, there were like 4 or 5 other dwarves as well. In response, some people that are on the server that I don't remember their name, to be honest.
Sorry, friends.
Sorry, friends, but
You're valid.
yeah,
You're just forgetful.
or they didn't say exactly who they were, just that they were on the server.
Yeah, no, very helpful for
but-
making connections.
But that's all right. But yeah, so we all participated. We all entered the main event, and then Rust and I entered the redemption event because the main event didn't go quite to what we had hoped. But yeah.
Yeah, no. Day one, I went 0-3-2, so I dropped out and started teaching the deck on day 2, which was fun. I'll probably do that at the next play to win event. Is just if I bomb out, I'll just teach the deck. Highly recommend doing that. It's a load of fun. So let's talk about what we expected. We didn't have a whole lot of expectations outside of T&K, Kinnan, and TNT. And I feel like those were more or less justified and vindicated. Like
The
our
Northeast is Kinnan country.
It is Kinnan country. Lots of them. We saw some more than just that, though. I saw a decent amount of Esper, mostly Tivit, and there was a lot of Thras X decks, like Sultai Thras decks.
There was Akiri Thras, there was Francisco Thras, there was I don't remember the last one that I saw.
There was one Tevish Thras, I think.
There were 1 or 2, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a here comes the hashtag. Hash brown. Very good. And there's in Grixis Pirates. There was
you're missing one deck, I think.
What's that?
That was very prominent there. I saw so much Lumra.
I only saw like 2 people playing Lumra.
All right, excuse me.
I actively
he said it
twice.
He said it. He spoke it into existence. I'm going to sideshow here.
Going in the middle of the. Yep. Okay.
Bam.
I mean, because like I actively played against it twice, and then there was the only thing that I heard people talking about.
Yeah. You don't want to get me started talking about that deck. I'm now hot.
Yeah, let's not talk about Bear.
We're not going to talk about Bear. It's fun, is what I'll say. It's fun.
It's mono green crick. That's
it's mono green crick, and that's really all we need to say about it. If you like that, it's fun. But yeah, so it was the talk of the town while we were there. I don't know if it was overrepresented based on that. I definitely saw a lot more Malcolm Vile. That's not just at this tournament. That's like just generally. There's a lot of Malcolm Vile rolling around.
Yeah, there were at least 4 that I know of. Lily Drake was there, and then one of our locals, Logan Ashley, was playing Malcolm Vile as well, and he top 16, I think, or top 20. So he did pretty well.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. Was there a matchup here, like on the table, that we thought was like we didn't do so hot against?
I mean, the pods that I saw Tivit in were both really weird. I had double Magda, Godo, and Tivit, and then I had Magda, Tivit, Tasiger, and Durevi, and that game had someone leave after, like, in the middle of it, which they told us up front. But it put us in a very awkward situation because I had Win on board. The Tasiger was about to win with a Neoform line, and we're just like, this is a BS situation. Let's just draw.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the couple games that I saw Tivit, Tivit won because it was against 3 red decks that slowed the game down, and otherwise it was, I don't know.
I bullied the Tivit in my game.
Oh, did you manage to actually get the dragon that we were retesting?
Oh yeah, that was the one time I had CHD the entire tournament. And it was really good. It was really good, but that was the only thing. But the problem was with my Tivit games is that the Tivit was playing like Atraxa used to, with like super parasitic, just doing nothing, while Stella Lee just had the nuts. So that was the rough one. It was basically Tivit not playing like a control player at all, and just keeping like a gas hand and losing. So yes, I lost to Tivit. I lost to Tivit not playing his deck. Other than that, there wasn't like anything that that felt like was crazy. Like TNK is obviously just really good, and I think better than TNT right now by like a lot. But only because the pilots are much better, on average. That's like
I'd say that both TNT and Cannon have a problem where the pilot makes the deck a lot more than the deck makes the deck. It's a lot easier to pilot than other decks in some regards, but like the ceiling is still pretty high. And yeah, I mean Magda suffers from that problem too. The more popular that we get, there are definitely some pilots that are not doing well because they don't know the deck well enough.
hey man,
And that's
I know the
part
deck.
of
I
why.
know the deck just
Hey,
fine.
hey, but that's why we're here, right? That's why this server exists.
Yeah,
The whole goal is to help people get
yeah.
better at the deck and stop being what fighting game players call pot monsters.
What's that mean?
It means that they enter the tournament, they go 0-2, and then they leave.
Right. Gotcha.
They're just there to add money to the pot.
We like to call those donators.
I donate a lot when I go to these tournaments.
Me too.
Yeah, no.
But that's really important though, is that like even some of the better players, like Rust and I did the same basically in the tournament, and Rust is a better player than I am. And there are other situations where other people just did better than us on the deck, and either you just get lucky with your matchups, you get lucky with what you draw. It is a singleton format. Like it is what it is.
Also, something I want to, and this is not a dig at literally anyone that we played with, or any other dwarves that came to the event. I felt like I have gotten stronger games on the cEDH Discord. There was like a decent amount of like on board obvious punting happening.
Yep.
Especially after round 2, like you were in the pit if you went 0-2. And that was very real. I was watching in real time as like I had to rescue my third draw my second draw from the defeat as one player tried to just gift the game to another. So that happened at least on 2 occasions where the game was just like I felt like I was playing two-headed giant, but one of the heads was self-flagellating.
What do you mean by gifting the game? Like they know that they can't make it, but someone else
Okay,
can, so
so
they thought they'd be.
I don't know if it's not in the collusion sense. Like literally, if you're seeing the game the way, from my perspective, the way I'm seeing it, and I can articulate the necessary like cause and effect of what you're about to do, and you still go for it, and then you're confused when the player that I said was going to win is going to win. That's what I mean when I say gifting the game. Like you've been told exactly how it's going to go, it goes that way, and you just have a question mark on top of your head, like why did that person win? That's what I mean by gifting the game. Just like thoroughly obvious threat assessment situations where they just make the wrong choice. And they even when being told what the right choice is, like hands on the table kind of situations.
Right. So just generally bad play, and I want to do my thing. Don't tell me what to do.
I don't even. It wasn't like the rude kind of don't politic with me kind of vibe. That wasn't actually. I had a lot of really good games. It was just players that were kind of in the tank and tunnel vision a little too hard.
Okay.
Another thing, very powerful aspect of Magda is being able to hold multiple players hostage at the same time and force draws. We're probably one of the better draw forcing decks in the format because we can say, if you win, I've got Torpor. Go for the win. Go for the win. I have
XYZ.
XYZ Agathas, right? Like there's nothing anyone's gonna be able to do to stop me from stopping you, and then you're just gonna punt the game. Let's draw. Like that. That's something that I did 3 times, more or less, during the weekend, and it works. It's great. It feels good, and it's
Also, because of how good we are at that, it makes too many board states where winning is a lot more difficult for us.
yeah. Oh, yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, king making is unintentional king making is a very good way of putting it. That was happening a decent amount.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Right. So let me pop down to the next slide real quick. Discord. All right. So the top 16. Kinnan won, followed
Freedom
by
waffle.
yeah, that was Freedom. Followed by a Elsha, a T&K, and then a Kairi Hinatsugu. There was that Tevish Thras, and then there was one Rogsai, one Malcolm Thras, or no, Malcolm Thras, Francisco Thras. The Pirates mixed up. Another T&K, another Italian, another T&K. There is one TNT up there, as far as I'm. Yeah, there's just one TNT. I have some thoughts on the Akiri Thras. I don't think the deck did that well. There were some shenanigans during one of our games that should have been a draw but weren't. And we were just exhausted in Game 5, so we didn't call a judge. Mistake on my part. But I'm not super high on that deck. But I do think the Sultai Thras decks are really cool.
Then we had the Elmar and Warnog deck played by Hunter. He's also a Magda pilot that is in our Discord.
That deck was awesome. I saw it twice. Not one in game one game I watched. Very cool. Definitely like it a lot. Yeah, the world. It's the World Gorger deck, right?
Yeah, important part about playing as World Gorger.
Yes.
On the first iteration of World Gorger, get rid of the World Gorger.
Yes. Everything stays gone.
Yeah.
Fiend Hunter yourself, friends. But yeah, no, it's really diverse. It very much shows that TNT is not figured out yet. Max D or Max P rather, being the one TNT in the top 16 is not super surprising. He's a very good pilot, but there was a lot of just okay TNTs at the tournament, and it showed in terms of people's placement. People still on Sultai Thras, Old Faithfuls, and T&K. They did better because the good pilots are still on the deck they're most comfortable on.
All right. So let's move to the next slide, the metagame breakdown.
Yeah, so it's really small, but the conversion rate for T&K was 21. The conversion rate for TNT was 4.3. Kinnan was pretty low as well, 5%. Magda did not do great at this tournament, so I don't want to talk about that.
Yep.
All the one-offs did great. That's Tibbet did terribly. 0%.
I'm actually surprised that Francisco Thrasios only had one pilot because we have a pilot locally. And I guess they were on something else this tournament.
Possibly. But yeah, the Sultai players If you look at the other end of the country, it's just like Glarb all day, all night. Like there's lots of Glarbs rolling around, and a lot of Sultai pilots have switched over to Glarb, and he's doing pretty great. This is not relevant to this tournament, but like Sultai is, it may not be this Sultai deck, but Sultai is doing very well, which is good.
I mean, the first Glarb to actually win a 50-plus man tournament was from our area as well, Sully. And that deck can be very scary, especially for us, because like a lot of the free removal that Black has is 4 or more CMC, but ends up being free somehow, like Snuff Out, or Deadly Rollick, etc. So
Yeah.
it's kind of annoying.
So basically, this was T and K's day. Everyone else that are like the super heavy meta decks were overrepresented and underconverted, and the one-offs did really well. A lot of
Or
them.
decks with a few players like Kenrith.
Right.
Like the Brian Lee who didn't top, but like did well with Kenrith. He won our last tournament locally. He's a very good player.
Yep. All right. That's kind of the meta breakdown.
And now we get to talk about overperforming and underperforming cards.
Yes. So, I'll talk about mine first. Flute was gangbusters. It kept people from winning. I got oppoed once, and they got the Flute, and it still did work. Right? They didn't choose Magda; they chose a Shorekai, and I never felt bad having the card. It always did something. It always had a target. And Soul Cauldron is such a beautiful TNT hoser because they like that Hazel Brewmaster line, and it's just like, nope, you don't get it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to Rust in a minute.
Yeah.
My Disruptor Flute was that it did things for me in one game, and then I didn't actually like that I played it. And in another game, I got to hold Tameshi hostage with it and forced myself into a position where everyone else at the table needed me alive to deal with Tameshi. And there was a Bowmaster in play, and Magda lived through 5 turn cycles with Bowmaster in play, just because I was the only one that could do anything against Tameshi. So Disruptor Flute does really well.
Make yourself unkillable.
And then Pyrokinesis was probably the best removal spell the entire tournament for me.
100% agree. It was keeping Thras off the board. It was keeping Kinnon off activations. There's just so many things it did. But
And now, Rust, what are your cards, huh?
Yeah, talk about your weird cards.
Why was Blasphemous Act so strong for you? Didn't you only play it in one game?
So I saw it twice. I played against a lot of Kinnon, and it was very good in those decks because it's odd CMC that also gets rid of Void Winnower, which is one of the situations that came up with it.
Yep.
What round is this? This is my round. In my round 4, it helped keep the Lumira deck off of our backs for 2 turns because we killed all of their value creatures that we're trying to combo with. And I think that card is just in the current meta with it just being so slow, that having just a
Blasphemous Act
good board wipe is kind of warranted.
Right.
And then Forbidden Orchard.
Yeah.
So,
how does this work, Rust? You want to explain to the class?
So Forbidden Orchard kind of has this trifecta thing going on with it, where In one of my games, it prevented the Tymna player from drawing any cards off of their combat. In one of my other games, it was crime triggers to make me treasures outside of my commander because we were locked under Drain the Magistrate. So that by the time I was able to find Talon Gates, I basically just had an activation on board. And then the third one was it let me win through somebody's One Ring protection. In one of my this is my round 1.
Please explain to the class how you went through One Ring protection with.
Are we okay?
It's a non-deterministic line. Let's go there.
So it depends on what your opponents are playing. In that pod specifically, my opponents were playing I just had the picture. Najila, Rograk Thrasios, and Derevi. The Derevi player had the One Ring. So at that point, when you start doing your Chaos Warp loops with like Pinnacle Monk and Zoilos Justice, instead of doing it on Pinnacle Monk, you can do it on Forbidden Orchard to make infinite mana of every color, and then also give every opponent who does not have protection infinite spirits. At which point, you start redoing the Chaos Warp loop, but on your opponent's stuff, on their spirits rather. So that way, once you have a perfectly sculpted hand, you can basically answer any possible way or any possible permanent that your opponents put into play until they put in a win condition for you, and then you either return the favor of their win condition or like Liquid Metal Torque it and Sculpting Steel it.
So you steal their Thoracle, Gonti style.
Yes, that is what ended up happening. I put the Najila player's Thoracle into play and then just took it.
Yep. On top of their they have no, they would win if for whatever reason that got stuffed because they would have 0 library.
No, because they didn't have Tainted Pact for console, and they still had like 50 plus cards in their deck.
Right. So it was just random. It wasn't like the last card or anything. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it's a neat way you can win sometimes. And it is very much the definition of crackhead tech.
And when you're on Bark Farm Harvester with this particular line, you get access to all of your counter spells again, so it's not a problem if they even try to attempt, because you're just like, cool, I'm going to counter this with Tibalt Trickery, and oh, you have a counter spell, I'm going to Red Blast that, or I'm going to Untimely Malfunction it. It's like, they can't do anything. You can just get all your stuff back forever.
Alright, so that's our overperforming cards. We liked these. Underperforming cards. I'll start. Grinding Station was a brick. And every single time I saw it, it killed a mulligan that I would have otherwise kept. What if they warp into Abolisher? You
Talon Gates of Madara.
Talon Gates or Twin Shot. So yeah, Grinding Station is a neat, self-contained win con, effectively, that does work, but it is very clunky and doesn't do anything aside from ruin top deck tutors the rest of the time, and it's also an awkward mana value that you can't tutor it off of Saga. It doesn't do anything most of the time. It's a post I have the win card, or I need to unlock my win card, and that's just not good enough for me. Wintermoon is, and you'll see this in the changes to the deck list for Magdanomicon. Wintermoon, the math looks approachable and acceptable for breaking parity when you've got Wintermoon down, but in reality, it's so feast or famine whether you get the ability to break parity, that I'd almost rather have the consistency of Orb. But I wouldn't play that either. It just it's not worth the deck building constraint. There's crimes. There is getting too like I would rather have Sokenzan and never get the Christmas land of having Maskwood Sokenzan to hasty treasure creators than play Winter Moon.
We're going to talk about the upsides and downsides in a little bit, so
Yeah.
Just
Winter Moon just like it. I played it twice. It did nothing twice, or it speed bumped the table minorly. I didn't break parity, so it was tantamount to a Winter Orb. Not my jam. Not my flavor of stacks. I like my stacks to be hard. This one is like verging on hard, but not quite. Break parity as easily as we thought because the number of mountains you would need really eats into your tech slots, and we're a monocolored deck. We should be able to play our tech slots. All right, on to you, Rust.
So I'm going to preface, I'm biased against Red Blast and Pyroblast just not being the things that I want to be doing with the deck anyway. But I thought I would play them as tech slots going into a very large tournament, very open meta. And then I lost to every single thing that was not blue. So like Hazel's Brewmaster, it didn't do anything against that. It didn't do anything against Breach. It didn't do anything against Grand Abolisher. Like, there were so many things that, in theory, it would hit. And don't get me wrong, I saw a lot of blue. But playing against blue cards and losing against blue cards are two very different things. And yeah, that's basically the short of it.
there's often only like 3 or 4 times, or 3 or 4 cards in general that like are blue I win the game buttons. But even though things like Valley Flood Caller are very popular, depending on what they have, they can still win over the top of it. So like, you need to be very specific as to like when you're using it, and a majority of the time, it's a counterspell.
Yeah.
And it's not even a counterspell that you're initiating. More often than not, it's just backup.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other thing too is like, I know this can be said about a ton of different cards in the deck, but it's especially true with these. They got to be in your hand. They don't do anything if they're in your deck. So I liked having more generic answers coming out of the tournament as opposed to going into the tournament with tech slots. If that makes sense.
So you're liking your 3-modal spells that don't rely on blue cards rather than
right.
these guys. Yeah, no, I get that. I could definitely see like if you were pinched between REB and Pyro versus like untimely Siege Smash, you might consider the latter over the former.
And then something that I want to touch on is that I am playing Tibalt's Trickery. I like Trickery because it just hits any spell. It also does give them something else in return. But I think the big thing about Trickery is that Red Blast and Pyroblast are more so of I'm not losing this game, as opposed to Trickery being more so protecting our win attempt so that we can win. And then Trickery also has some other uses to where like you can instant speed anything you need to cast out of your deck depending on where you're at. So it's also kind of got some combo uses too. So it's, I don't know. I like Trickery a lot actually, but I'm just not very high on either of the blasts.
The only thing that I can say to rebut that is that Red Blast and Pyroblast do deal with 2 of the more common ways that we do get stopped, which is bounce spells.
Yeah.
And primarily those are Into the Floodmaw and Chain of Vapor. Otawara still screws us,
Yeah.
clearly.
Yep.
And then my card was Wintermoon. I saw this card 4 times. 2 of the 4 games, it did not get cast because either I was in a position where if I played it on curve or if I played it with what was in my hand, which was interaction or whatever, there was a chance with my lands that I wasn't going to be able to recast Magda if she died, which was a very negative thing to have, right? But outside of the situations where it wasn't being cast, there was one game where I cast it and it almost cost me the game. And that's a very feels bad man sort of moment. And I know negative confirmation bias is a thing just like positive, but there are a lot of downsides, which we'll go over a little bit later, as to like why this card just isn't good enough. And that is one of the reasons. But going over Grinding Station, this was a decision that I made and Drew copied my deck for the tournament. And it was because going into a very large tournament, like 300 people, I was moving off of Spine of Isha, but I wanted a comfort pick that wasn't going to get stuck in hand, if necessary. And I also thought we were going to see a lot more Esper Plus decks, or just Esper decks, where Blind Obedience would be more prominent. And without Spine of Isha, you kind of need an answer to win through that. If a Graph Digger's Cage is in play, specifically if you're playing against like Pivot or something, that's very common for them to also be on Graph Digger's Cage. So not just for our own Graph Digger's Cage, but for other people's, this is a battered golem that can be tutored through Graph Digger's Cage. So if you make it helps you make infinite treasures, basically. And from that point, you can then transition to infinite untapped treasures through Cage, and then find a way to remove your Cage or your opponent's Cage in this situation. It didn't come up for me, but it also didn't break any of my hands as well. So, there were it being stuck in my hand was perfectly okay with me in the one game that I saw it, because I was doing the other things with the rest of my cards in my hand. It just being there let me hold up mana and sort of bluff that I had interaction in certain situations, which was fine. But ultimately, it didn't really amount to much. Didn't see Blind Obedience once. In general, I actually think that the format is moving into a position where decks that play Blind Obedience as a main win condition are not good enough.
I agree with that. Next slide. Lessons learned. So this is something we ran into, and something that is kind of necessary to talk about a little bit. EDH is a team sport for a lot of high skill people, and there is a decent amount of intentional king making, especially around win and ends, where people are paired down with their buddies. And that happens in basically any kind of free-for-all competitive environment, but it's particularly identifiable in cEDH, where you can see threat assessment being very warped, and not a whole lot of justification behind the warped view they have of the game state. And then at some point it dawns on you that you might be dealing with a 2v1v1 that only that you weren't aware of when you sat down, and that kind of just happens. A lot of top pilots are friends, and a lot of top pilots play together effectively at the tournament. They trade notes. They discuss things, and in some cases, they are buddies at the table.
If you don't need a win to get into top 16, and your friend needs a win to get into top 16, sometimes it's okay if you lose. Not saying that you're going to throw the game, but if you're not going to win, then maybe, you're making sure that your friend wins instead.
Right.
And that's just an unfortunate reality. Like, there were 3 games that I know of where outright collusion were happening, like, to the point where 3 players at a table were all just like, okay, well, this is how it's gonna go. And yeah, like, there was another game where two of my locals sat down with 2 top players, and those players just shared hands the entire time. They called a judge, and the judge was just like, yeah, that's part of the game. They're allowed to do that.
Yeah. There's not much you can do about it, aside from like here's a suggestion, not a good one, because it's not against the rules. The only thing you can do is counter politic with the if they're going to make it a 2v1v1, the best you can do is make it a 2v2, right? That's that's the best you can do. You can say, hey buddy, they're obviously cheating, for lack of a better word, or abusing
The rules of the game.
yeah, the rules of the game to basically have some like meta understanding of who's going to win this game. So we're going to do the same thing, if only so that they are punished and we are not. It's an unfortunate fire with fire situation, but that's what I recommend you do in that situation. You make it very obvious at the table that you see what's happening, and you say, hey buddy, we're not going to win this if we aren't playing the same game they are.
I'd like to add something to this if you guys are right there.
Go for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
L1.
Yeah. All right. So the problem with collusion is that is the fact that as mentioned, if there's no actual benefit of being offered, which would make it bribery, there's nothing in the MTR that prevents people from making the decisions that they do in their games. And I've faced this problem, I think, in an amplified manner, because as some of you may know, I'm a TO in where I live, and I've run a number of tournaments. And there's an alternate TO that came up with a team structured event. I mean, they construct teams, and the teams would play in a 64-man cEDH event where they try to win points for their team, and that has led to a natural outcome that has led to them being actually having that mentality when it comes to individual tournaments. And what happened in the last major tournament I ran, 2 tournaments ago, was that the 2 teammates were playing against a table with at a pod with 2 others, and one player who was playing Kinnan had clearly gotten the win with infinite colored mana, and yet what he did was he got out his Tide Spout and Hullbreaker combo, and he just bounced the other 2 players' permanents back to their hands, and he asked his teammate to kill them. And he just and when I confronted him about it, he just said, "Oh, I want my teammate to win. If you're on my team, I'll do the same to you."
Right.
And that is extremely blatant, and but again, nothing I can do about it. In fact, this story actually made it onto Steve Hammond's video. If you I'm going to share the link here. You have time, you can take a read of it, or watch it when you have the time. But essentially, the story that he's recounting there, that my fellow CCC member told him about, the judge that was said to, that was me. And
That's Nick Hammond, not Steve.
Yeah,
sorry,
Nick Hammond.
Nick.
Yeah, I was confused.
My Steve Hammond is a race car driver. I don't know, but okay. Coming back to that, one thing we've found helpful, and this only applies at smaller events, because at bigger events it will be incredibly difficult to do this, was to ask all players to reveal their hands and their and we at the end of any match, and we would take a picture, and if any controversy come up, we could publish the picture and just show what's going on, and make it into a name and shame sort of thing. Again, this would work in the events that I run, because the biggest I've ever ran was 40. But I think in larger events like what you guys do, that's probably not a good idea. But in to apply it in your games, you might want to consider that after the game, as soon as the win is declared, just ask them to reveal their hands, and then you can ask them questions and try to educate them on why that sort of thing is just bad. And that's it. Thanks.
Yeah.
When a lot of money is on the line for like big tournaments like this, though, trying to educate them is not gonna really matter.
Yeah, they literally don't give a flying F or fuck whatever. Okay, yeah, but the thing is
We're not
that
CBS. We're good.
yeah, we we do have to at least try, because the only way we can combat this is by doing that. And at the very least, you could give them a feels bad moment, I guess. But they might not just give yeah. All right, thanks.
No, anyone that's willing to do that does not feel like they feel like there is no social contract here. They've already accepted that they are going to take your lunch money, and abuse the social contract that we think we're operating under. So what I'll say is that I think if this like kind of name and shame situation was going to work, it would have already worked in the context of people that lie and break deals in competitive environments, and that's obviously not the case.
Yeah.
Some of the top players will lie. will lie. Some of the top players are like out and out very anti-lying as well. But there are very good players that will just lie. And I don't have a problem with that personally. I just think that I think the problem with lying and deal breaking is more visceral to the average cEDH player and more identifiable to the average cEDH player. That if we were going to have movement on solving the issue, it would have happened there rather than, oh, I think these people might have been colluding, but I don't have proof. Like the lying is very cut and dry. It's like, sorry, I'm getting in the top 16. I just lied to you, right? That happens every tournament, and no one does anything about it. And no one's EV has realistically suffered for it.
I think that situations like this should be publicized, at the very least, warn people not to trust what that person would say in the future.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky for me because I don't actually find lying as like a problem at the table. Like I don't have any like moral problems with lying during a game where hidden information is like the entire point. It's more of a game theory. I have a problem where I'm trying to inflict a negative EV on someone and make them a table pariah at the next tournament they play in because they lied, but I'm also imparting like some real world like harassment potential on them, and I don't think that's worth it for a card game on any sense. To Koivito's point, I think forcing the table to be more honest is a better solution. Like obligating the table to be more honest and using that jujitsu at the table is better for the game, and it also doesn't like have this weird social meta social problematic aspect of people like attacking people on Blue Sky or saying, hey, this person's a lying cheaty when they just lied. I don't know. I think the name and shame is unfortunately a toxic aspect. When there was a major player, had some serious righteous indignation about someone who won through a lie, and it was just like really messy and gross. It was like everyone was being attacked from left, right, and center for no real benefit to the community, and it just just felt like it wasn't worth it.
Uh, so just let me clarify. I don't say that you should attack them, but I do say that you should call them out, not in a way that is saying that hey, it's wrong that you lied, but rather to say that hey guys, this is just a public service announcement. In future, if you're playing with this guy, this is my experience. Make of it what you will.
Yeah, but that's like that's the best laid intentions of like you're saying, hey, this person's a lying liar who will lie to win, and then less awesome people than yourself are going to use that information and find that person's socials and make you know, gross accusations or just flame them for it. And we know this because
Yep.
it happens. So that's my only point is I think making it a matter of public record in that way where you're trying to PSA someone out of EV.
Mm-hmm.
I think it only has knock-on consequences that aren't worth the benefit to the community because I think it necessarily has those costs. And now we've talked a lot more about this than I wanted to, so let's move on.
Yeah, I was gonna say we should move on, but there is one thing that I want to add before
Yeah.
we move on.
Okay, buddy.
People who are admitted cheaters have been let into other tournaments. So if there is no real downside to admitting that you cheated, people actually lying in tournament or whatever, there are going to be no consequences. So like, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
cEDH has done absolutely zero work to manage bad apples in that sense. Despite being a fairly small and tight knit community, has done almost no work because cheaters tend to be good at the game, unfortunately, and they have friends.
Yeah. So, if I may say one last thing,
Yeah.
before we move on, I'm so sorry, but okay. So, why I say this is because I've seen firsthand how this type of collusion. Oh, well, no, sorry, excuse me. Let me correct myself. I've heard secondhand from a person who's seen it firsthand how this sort of collusion can actually kill the game. Basically, in the Philippines, cEDH was really big back a few years ago, but they a bunch of unscrupulous pricks started doing things like forming unofficial teams to collude and push one of them to win, and then they would split the pot. And it became so prevalent that a term was come up for it called corpo gaming. And if you look at the scene of cEDH today in Philippines, there's almost none. It's almost primarily dual commander because no one cares to play multiplayer anymore. And I think that coming back to what you said, Drew, I believe you're a way nicer guy than I am because for me, I would say that I would share my experience because that's my right to do so, and the consequences on the person doing the lying, that's on him because he chose to lie, and the consequences of whatever people choose to do with that information that I share out, that's not on me. I'm just sharing information. If they want to do something militant, that's on them, and if it's a natural consequence, so be it. And yes, I'm not a nice guy.
I think you're a very nice guy. I think you're thinking more of the greater good than anything. But yeah, it's a complicated situation. I don't claim to have the answer for it because I don't think there's a great answer. Maybe just some partial answers. But we've talked about it enough, and I'll let Nick Hammond and co. I guess Aaron, you're on that committee. You guys figure it out. It's your job, not mine.
I'll be sure to bring it up.
Honestly, yeah, it's one of the things that frustrates me the most about tournament cEDH. Everything else has been pretty cool. Even draw stuff has not been so bad. Anyway,
the next thing
Yeah.
to talk about as far as these big tournaments go is gap in player skill is something that is very easily taken advantage of. And like you'll see this in locals, but it is done to a much higher degree at these bigger tournaments, especially where your first two wins matter more than anything else.
like people like Ian will say, "I'm gonna get my 2 wins, and then I'm gonna go hang out with my fiance/wife." And that's what he says about. He used to complain about people IDing to continue moving up to top 16 with like 2-3 wins. But everyone that can do it does do it, so you have to do it. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in the mud with the people that weren't good enough to get their 2-0s and will make bad threat assessment around you. That's really important. Is that if you're playing early, the best player is going to utilize the fact that you're Magda and Spooky on board to make the less less practiced player your problem. He's going to point them at you and say, "Yeah, you should deal with that," and that's going to work. So you got to be better at that. You got to be better at the game than the game and at that political judoing than they are. Yeah, yapping is the key skill for this deck. You got to be way better at it than everyone else just to make it through Swiss. But if you get that 2-0,
the ID stuff isn't even like the big deal anymore. Like in these bigger tournaments and even in locals, like in locals after round 3, if it's a 5-round tournament, like they're pairing you with people that need to win.
That's true. That's true.
When you're higher up, so getting these IDs into the finals isn't really a thing in a lot of situations.
But getting the wins early gets you out of the mud, as it were, and you have better opponents with better threat assessment. And I would rather play against consistent, good threat assessing players because I think our deck is good, than play in a pair up, pair down situation with a couple of mediocre players who don't understand how the deck works, so they over target it and allow the best player at the table, if it's not you, utilize that knowledge and skill gap to point them at you, or make them respect you too much. And
yeah, like at the event, I had people say that they don't have experience against Magda, and like I'm very heads up with how I politic, and I'm overly honest in a lot of situations. But like there were some tough spots that I was able to talk myself out of, and like people were like, "We need to talk after this game about how you actually like managed to make that work." Like I don't understand.
yeah, I mean it's really what it is. It's a core element of the game. Sorry, Aaron, I was talking over you. Can you repeat that?
Nah, just tongue in cheek. That's our chance to get them on Magda.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Carry around your tokens, friends. Recruit Dwarf Pro Legion. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really it. It's just, you got to be a really good yapper so that those situations don't eat you, because they will, and then you'll just see more of them as you get closer to your win-ins at 1-0-3, right?
Right. And it's also very important to understand like board states and know when you need to swap your politics from being like not necessarily lawyer speak, but to be like, okay, I'm actually not trying to win here. I'm pushing for a draw, and this is what my plan is. This is what I'm going to use my resources on, etc. And that can be a lot more powerful. But again, you don't want to be playing for a draw at all times, but sometimes you don't have a choice.
It is the easiest place to politic from, and that's something I'll note. It is the easiest place I found the most success in my politicking during the situations, but you cannot default to it. Otherwise, you will go 0-5 and be like, "Oh shit, was I supposed to win a game?"
I'm still undefeated.
Right.
Next slide.
So, real quick, one of the more interesting ways that I found to win games, and this mainly depends on how well you know the player base or how well you can convince your opponents who don't know you to trust you. Where I will have a win on board for like 5 or 6 turn cycles, but I just don't do it, regardless of whether like I need to push for a win right now or anything like that. Like under no circumstances am I going to try to win the game unless I'm in a spot to where if I don't, I just lose on the spot. And that is an honest, like an agreement that I will make to my pod and I will uphold so often.
Can you explain what you mean by that a little bit?
So basically, So like, let's say I have like 5 treasures, an artifact dwarf in play, and then 2 of my opponents are tapped out, but one of them isn't. Obviously, you don't go for it there because, or depending on your hand and what you could have, you could try to go for it. But even if I think it's safe, I won't. Under the guise of like, I think a draw is still fine. So you're mainly playing to force a draw. The key part of that, though, is once you kind of put yourself in the situation of like, I could go for a win, but I'm actively not, and your opponents have trusted you on that. The flip point is where, like, let's say opponent B starts going for a win, and opponents C and D just let it resolve because you have previously said you're not going for a win unless you lose, and then you just let opponent A's thing go, and now you're in a spot where if they stop you, it's king making.
Yep.
And I've gotten a lot of free wins that way.
Sense.
It's probably like the most consistent way to get wins, realistically, is just to force it to a situation where your opponent is going to be king making, and unless they're in a team with the other player, realistically, both players are not going to try to interact or interfere.
The way that I like to explain it is that I'm not going to go for a win unless me losing, or like unless I don't leads to me losing, and at which point I just try to throw myself in front of the bus as many times as possible.
To make it to where you have to go for that win.
Right. They're like, what are you doing? You didn't go get your Torpor Orb. And I'm like, yeah, but now it's Thorkel's on the stack, so like, anyway, can I go get this Clock of Omens?
Right. It's like, I'm not gonna force a draw here. You either let me win or you let them win. That's stronger than the proverbial like 4-way Mexican standoff. Technically, right? They might just punt, but I don't know why they would. Like, I'll lose later, but the stack is not later. Yeah, no, you need to. What Aaron said was very appropriate. Like, you need to make sure you are explaining calmly, kindly, the way in which their actions will necessitate a loss in their them in the same way it would have been for you. So there's no point in making game actions to choose a winner is bad play and
right.
unsportsman. The last point here is this is more relevant when you were doing like a on my turn win attempt kind of situation, which is most of our win attempts. But something that I see, and I see even for myself, and I realized about myself going through this tournament, was that we can often fight through 1 or 2 pieces of interactions, especially if you're on the mid-range tempo build like I have 2 cards in my hand that can stop a counterspell or deal or swat something away, and that might be what I need, right? It might just be Roxai had the nuts and he had 2 counterspells in hand and he had it, right? You're okay. You can sometimes be okay going for wins like that. The problem is when Roxai gets stuffed there, a lot of the time Roxai doesn't have much to say about the rest of the game, or decks like it, right? The rebuild isn't as consistent. The inevitability isn't there, right? If you throw too much money down the well, too much money, throwing good money after bad, you might be in a position where you are not only removing your ability to interact with the stack, you're probably removing its ability to interact with the stack by putting so many resources into a win attempt. And something that I've found is that before you're in a position where you waste your last piece of interaction, your opponent's wasting their potential last piece of interaction to stuff you, you say, maybe I'll pull back. Maybe I'll pull back. Let's have this conversation. You're putting this in the stack. I'm just going to decide not to go for the win here. You keep that in your pocket and pointed at player C, who is in a position to win if I don't, right? And ideally, you determine what the situation is without having to have that conversation, but you can still have that conversation when the last known information is, the most recent information is them putting that card on the stack, and no one has gained information. They can take that card back, right? And you can just politic to say, hey, I'm not going to push here. You stopped me, but you didn't have to spend that spell, so don't stop me. Stop the next person.
Right. But also, like, the important part about what Rust is saying as well, in conjunction with what you're saying, is in these positions where you have those extra resources where you can defend yourself. When you are putting your opponents in a situation where they are now king-making, those only have to deal with one opponent. So if the opponent is going for a situation where they're going to try to win, but they have a Chain of Vapor in hand, but you have your Ontami Malfunction or your SWAT or whatever, like, you're going a one-on-one at that point with the opponent's interaction. You don't have to worry about 3 players interacting if they are on the up and up, right? Like, because at that point it's 2 people fighting to win the game, and unless both of those players can stop both of those players at the same time, like, they're just giving the game to another person. And yeah, so like a lot of times it can come down to those things. And a redemption event is for anyone that does not do well enough in a tournament to have it be worth attempting to make top 16 from their current record. It's a secondary tournament for those players.
Yeah, typically if you're doing like a 7-round tournament, 5 one day, 2 the next, you'll play your 5 rounds, and if you're not in contention, you'll drop and then play a 3 or 4 round the next day. And
yeah, it's only at larger events.
Right. Yeah, it is really cool. But I would agree that it sounds like, from my experience, it's always better to be in that, like, you're not choosing whether you get shot, you're choosing which gun shoots you, and to choose a gun is to make a choice that doesn't matter. So don't make a choice, don't do anything, is a much stronger position to be in than having to talk someone back off the ledge from blowing all of their interaction on you by choosing not to do the thing that would win you the game. That's a different level, or a different type of political play, a different type of strategic play, and they're both necessary if you're presenting a win on your turn versus presenting a win in response to someone else's win. So they're almost different topics, but you have to consider them both, because they'll both come up. I think that's it for the lessons learned.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, y'all ready for some lore?
Lore? What lore?
Okay, hold on.
It's a giant book.
Rust
take
wants
over
to-
for just 1 second.
All right, what you got?
So I have to go run another pre-release in about an hour, so I need to go and get ready for that. So I'm probably dipping.
Okay.
Before that happens, I do want to give a shout out to Crimson Lion. They're running a 10K on March 15th in the middle of Dallas. It's going to be at the Hunter Burton. If you want to come play for guaranteed 10 duels, and then depending on player entry, it's going to get upgraded to a Time Twister. Come visit, come hang out. Let's play some cEDH. I know Comedian's going to be there. There's a bunch of other big names that are going to be there. Anyway, I gotta go.
my February project here is going to be getting an event feed and a coordination forum.
Okay, sick.
For the server.
Right.
All right. Have a good pre-release, buddy.
See ya.
All right.
Oh no, he left. I had a question for him.
Right.
Oh, why is he playing Thespian Stage?
Yeah, why?
A very, very slow Mutavault.
It's a slow Mutavault. It can give you an extra tap outlet. There are a lot of things that it can do, but it really depends on like the type of things that your opponents have. Like, because Funnily enough, like I'm gonna make a copy of your Manamo, and now I'm gonna make an extra treasure every turn cycle by untapping Magda. Is kind of funny.
It is funny, but it's like, okay, how many decks are playing Manamo? Kinnan.
Not, yeah, it's not very many.
But Kinnan's big, but like, let's press on to the lore if we're okay with that.
Sure.
All right, so we're talking about our updates for the Magdanomicon. A lot of them are going to be pretty obvious. We played Cavern, Hoard, Dragon, and it's not in our list from the overperforming and underperforming cards. That's because we were more or less just whelmed by it. Like, it was just okay, and just okay is not good enough for a 5-mana card.
I mean, before the tournament, I was not okay with the card, and then I tested the card. It's really good in the mirror, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
the 4-way, yeah.
and there were some situations at the Rumble where it did okay.
Yeah.
And then, since I've been playing it some more, it's been stuck in hand. It's been not doing anything.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah. So I am replacing that card basically with Lifecraft Engine.
Yeah. Which is going up a vehicle.
And an Artifact Dwarf at the same time.
And a Dwarf, yeah. I wasn't...
Double the consistency.
Yeah. My list is... I took a fairly separate route to more or less the same endpoint with my card swapping. But we talked a lot about Wintermoon.
I want to talk about this first point more so than anything.
Sure.
Is that when you're evaluating cards, sometimes you have to think about them in your opening hand, and you need very specific hands for Wintermoon to be good. You need double mountain, and then you also need like your opponents to be playing more lands than not. And it also needs to be in a situation, you need them to be playing less lands. Because if they're playing more lands, they're just going to be playing lands turn after turn. And then they're not as affected by Wintermoon the turn that those lands come down. So in addition to their dorks and their rocks and stuff, they can still sort of get there.
This is why I called it... Oh, sorry.
And that's a real problem. Because like in the mid game, it's very strong, right? But it also doesn't stop your opponents from untapping with Seedborn Muse. It's only on their own untap step. So they still get to do the Kennen thing, do the Thrasios thing, etc. And a lot of the decks that are popular in the format, or a very large portion of the metagame, play through this sort of Stax effect relatively consistently. But it still can hurt them very badly in some situations. The biggest problem to me is that if you are not breaking parity and they've removed Magda, this has the same problem as Tanglewire, where if you have Magda down in another dwarf or something, and then you play Tanglewire, and then someone goes in response to the Tanglewire trigger, Orcish Bowmaster, kill your Magda. And now you're like, okay, well, if I don't have the lands or I don't have the board state already assembled to replay my Magda, then I just time walked myself by, in some cases, up to 2 turn cycles or more. Because you're then having to tap your lands. You have to wait until you can tap Magda or replay Magda and stuff. It causes some big problems, and Wintermoon is the exact same unless you have Magical Christmas Land for your lands. And the math for getting enough mountains, the lower end of acceptable was 13, and it just wasn't consistent enough. You actually need to be on like 18 to 20 for it to be something that feels good a majority of the time. And when you're trying to like play this out on curve or something, you also need a hand that gives you extra mana beforehand, where you're going like Magda into Wintermoon, or you're doing like double dwarf into Wintermoon, where you know that you'll have the mana for Magda because you have at least one mountain the following turn, and blah blah blah. It's just there are so many situations where I would account for Wintermoon being at its peak value as Magical Christmas Land that there's too many downsides to warrant playing it because of that.
Yeah. I want to hone in on the time walking yourself, because you created an inflection point where you were going to parity, and I kind of want to credit Sunglasses for helping me find the language to describe this dynamic. That when in a situation to give your opponent a solution to a problem, that solution is to time walk you, or potentially just lock you out of the game because you can't recast your Magda. Don't put yourself in that position. Don't give your opponent the perfect use of their path to exile. Don't do it. And in a situation where you are presenting a search, and they're like, "Great, I'm going to time walk you by killing your Magda. You can get whatever the fuck you want." In situations, it's better to not to lobby for a much better, more political search, so that they decide that time walking you isn't the best use of that path to exile. I know this is off topic, but it's a similar thing when you talk about dropping a hard Stax piece that, but not for Magda being on the board, leads you to be locked out the same as your opponents. They're just like, okay, I'm not going to get to use this resource because my mana is going to be completely hosed, so I need to stop them from breaking parity. And they're gonna use it on you. So that's why another reason I don't like this card very much.
The other thing about this is that because it's a hard stacks piece, especially in this Rhystic Mystic sort of situation,
yes,
specifically with Rhystic Study, it doesn't give your opponents the flexibility to pay for the Rhystic Study. So it puts one player disproportionately ahead. If your Magda's dead, how are you, and you don't have the mana for it, how are you playing Uba Mask when this is out? Tisk, tisk, tisk.
I think you were saying Ubermask as a replacement hard stacks piece that doesn't like I get it. But
Yeah, I don't like giving my opponents an out if they
Yeah.
have a tutor in hand.
just an inflection point, like the weird inflection points where you're just like, the stacks has to be so hard for me to want that point, right? And realistically, the only ones that do that are Blood Moon and Magus,
Right.
and that's why they've never left the deck, because it doesn't matter. Okay, I have 3 mountains. Okay, cool, and I'll just recast my Magda when I draw my 4th mountain. That's a much better spot to be in than, oh, I dropped a Null Rod or a Winter Moon or a Tangle Wire. Now I'm never going to get to cast my Magda again, and Blue Farm is going to run away with the game, or Kinnan more likely is going to run away with the game.
This is why the phrase "play stacks, lose game" is very real
Yeah.
in some situations.
Talk about Boss's list, Boss and his magnificent run later, but it's I wish I could be as good and as lucky as him, is what I'll say. From
Going back to go ahead.
No, please, yeah, you're good.
I was gonna say, going back to Cavern Horde Dragon is you have some different inflection points as well. Because it's a creature and there's so many single target removal spells being added to decks at this point, sure, it's good, but it needs to connect. And if it's bounced to hand when it's a tutor target, and you don't have a lot of mana to recast Magda or something, and your goal is I'm going to do this and make some treasures and replay Magda, it's just not okay. And also there are more clones that people are playing recently, especially in canon lists. So in situations where people are cloning things, having this be a clone and then you being forced into this situation where well, now I have to get rid of my treasures because they're going to attack me, and it's the same thing that we're trying to do against players with Smothering Tithe with Cavern Horde Dragon. Just there's too many negative situations that can occur because of it, that sure, that it can win you games at times, but playing it from hand is too inconsistent, and if it does get played from hand, it's one bounce away from doing nothing. And in those situations, you're usually, already behind. And if you're already winning, it's not usually something you need.
Yeah.
So
in the in the um in the meta where getting this out makes you arch enemy, I have definitely had a situation where someone clones it and then mine gets bounced and they still have theirs, right? And giving Kennen this is utterly horrifying.
Yeah.
It is the Kennen wins that game 9 times out of 10. All right, I think that's it for these two. This is probably the longest one that we had. We've already gone over like the math for Wintermoon. Why it makes sense. These are our 4 trade-ins that make the most sense.
Specifically with this build, I don't like Shatter Skull Smashing myself, but it's pitchable to Mox, it's pitchable to Pyrokinesis, so it's good enough. And then just 3 utility lands, 2 for Crime Magda, 1 just because it does something else.
Yeah, I would. It's the 5th red land that we're not running right here. I mean, I'm on it, but you don't have to be. Is Barbering, and Barbarian Ring is Pay a Life. Sorry. Yeah, Barbering. This is never on.
Right.
You can be on it and take the life of return. You can be off it. It probably won't make any difference to 99% of your games. You'll feel bad if you were only did 3 extra life to not die to Winota that one game where it mattered. But I don't plan around those situations because who plays that deck? I mean, Joe has a local, but
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's a marginal card either way.
And we can skip down to the next actual change because we just talked about everything.
Yep.
This is a big one. Spine of Isha is being removed, and we're going up Stridehangar Automaton. Spine of Isha being removed adds a whole lot of complexities to winning at instant speed through Cage. But as long as you have enough ways to make infinite treasures that can be in your deck after you've draw looped into finding an answer, you can still find ways to win. The actual percent chance to brick is around 2%. So yeah. Let's go to the next page.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can draw loop your deck, find a removal, and then go for an instant speed win. And you only have around a 2% chance to not win in those situations. But realistically, in most game states, you are not forced to win at instant speed. You can go get all of your Stax pieces and then go, okay, now try to win. All while having all of your instant speed removal and mana available to you.
Because you have treasure vault and great furnace.
Right. You can do that, and then you can also grab all of your other artifacts and use them last. Usually it takes around 21 cards drawn to draw an answer to your own spine while having either backup or a second answer to your own spine.
Yep.
This is problematic if you are fighting through a rule of law effect, so all the more reason to just win on your next turn because your opponent's winning through Torpor Orb, God Pharaoh Statue, Portal to Phyrexia, potentially a second one because of Sculpting Steel, and then potentially a third trigger by using Return the Favor. Means that they are essentially going to have no board. You can leave your Grafdigger's Cage in play and then disrupt your flute some things. This is a mid-range build. It doesn't have as much stacks. But obviously you can still put things like Damping Sphere into play as well, making it a lot harder for your opponents.
Right. You can Sculpting Steel
so as long as
any number of things that will hose the game. Like Kennen can't win with his things. Oracle costs 30 mana.
So as long as you're not in a position where you need to win on top of someone at instant speed that can't be stopped by a Stax piece that you have, or you're going to time, there's not really any reason why you need to be winning at that particular juncture. You can just draw whatever cards that you need, play them on your next turn like Magda the Hoardmaster. You'll then have infinite untapped treasures. Then you can do the thing.
And even if you do, it's still a 96-98% chance that you don't brick, which those are numbers I'm really comfortable with. This is not Wintermoon math.
Right. And then Spine in general, when you're tutoring for it, the best way to explain it is kind of how Sunglasses did, is that like if you make this decision, is it going to get you obliterated and then have your opponent win the game? Like, am I actively going and tutoring for this to prevent myself from losing the game just to give it to someone else? So you're kind of forced to tutor this in a way that forces a draw. And there's plenty of other cards and other answers to the same problems that can force the draw in the same way.
Yeah.
So the fact that this realistically, like, it is stuck in your hand a majority of the time, it's not something you ever want to draw. And the reasons to tutor it are few and far between. Like, unless you're specifically stuck behind, like, Null Rod, Blind Obedience Effect, and, like, another reason why you can't be activating artifacts, like, you don't need to be getting your Spine of Ishah and then copying it. And if you are in that situation, how are you getting to 15 to 20 treasures to win through that board state anyway?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. Like, Dockside is gone. There's no more situation where Null Rod is out, your opponent docksides. There's now 14 artifacts and enchantments on the field. You play your own dockside. You had 5 treasures already, and now you can just go win. Like, that doesn't happen,
Yep.
right? So because of that, combined with the fact that we don't necessarily need to win through our cage in most situations, it's just not worth it. That
Playing for
2 to
a weird
4%
draw.
chance. Yeah.
Yeah.
The 2 to 4% chance to brick your win is worthwhile because you can still transition. Like, part of bricking your win also means that, like, all of your stacks is already in play. So if you fuck up, like, there's still a good chance that your opponents aren't going to win through that
They're
board
gonna spin
state
the table.
anyway.
They're gonna dirtle and try to go to time, and you can just call slow play over and over again. Yeah. Also, in those situations, don't let your opponents just flick their cards for 15 minutes a turn while they're in the tank doing literally nothing. They will try to pull a draw out that way. Don't let them. Call slow play. It is, in my opinion, very cheaty. So
Let's move on.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the next thing out is Vault Robber, and in is Axgard Cavalry.
Slide and talk about it.
So it's basically, you get a pseudo vehicle by giving haste to things. It's also a crime trigger. The realistic reason why you would want Vault Robber in most cases is pay 1, put your Magda from the graveyard back into the command zone for free. There's almost no negative situation where Magda dying can't be reacted to with this ability, but realistically, like, that happens few and far between. The only other times where Vault Robber is turned on is when Bowmaster goes crazy, or when you get wheeled or multiple wheels, and you just happen to hit some creatures, right? And those will happen, but it's a lot less often than Axgard Cavalry's ability being able to do something for you.
Right. The most likely outcome being I can turn my Magda. I can turn one Cavalry, turn 2 Magda, and still have a Magda swing on turn 2. That's like the most common one.
Yeah.
Which again makes it a pseudo vehicle.
All right. There was one slide that I forgot to include, and that was because we are going on to Lifecraft Engine. I am removing 3-tree Mascot because we're going up an Artifact Dwarf, and I want to stay right around the same amount in the deck. And instead, we're going up another vehicle, which my choice was Mobile Homestead, or Mobile Garrison, sorry, not Mobile Homestead, because Mobile Garrison has some value with making extra treasures, and it also has extra value for untapping your One Ring, untapping your Mana Vault, and sometimes those can be pretty important. But most of our vehicles are only important when Magda is out anyway. So the downside of that is few and far between. It's a 3/4. Whereas we've already talked about Burner Rocket. I think that having value on your vehicles is a little bit better than just giving yourself that one interaction of flash speed, because you're forced to hold that card back and then play it at a point where you get an activation from it. And that also requires a very specific board state, and it requires, Magda to have not died twice already and all these other things. Alongside the fact that it's one in the red versus either 2 colorless or 3 colorless. And when you're playing on curve, which our deck does a lot, yeah, tapping out sucks. But, going and playing this card in some cases is going to give you the treasures or the advantage that you need to push through. And, I played it in a tournament last week, and over 5 games, it made me 11 treasures, which
Solid
is
number.
not insignificant. And that was, I only saw it in 2 games. So
It's pretty great, actually. It's yeah. R.I.P. to the AP havers out there and the nice signed TMs.
hey man,
Sorry.
you can still play it. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna fault you for it. So now we have our watch list cards.
Yep. Let's talk about those.
So first we have Glasses of Urza. Being able to look at our opponent's hands is very powerful, especially when you're looking to push, or if you're looking to get information where you can use it to politic into getting activations, where your opponents, that they have a win condition in hand, etc. It's pretty cut and dry as to why this card can be strong. Over a 3-turn period, in most cases, you're going to know a majority of the cards that they've gotten, unless there's a Rhystic Study in play. Gimli is very strong when he does his thing, but he's also a magnet for removal. And you can argue that this being a magnet for removal is good enough to the point where Magda might not get removed. And that's perfectly fine. Like, in board states where he gets to do his thing, you're probably winning the game. City of Traders is a very good land. It forces some very awkward situations as far as how you sequence things, but it being a soul land just in some cases is enough.
Especially when we're going up on 3 mana good stuff like
Yeah.
Garrison and Lifecraft and Stridehangar.
Tanglewire is something you can consider. I still think there's too many risks involved with it, but the games where it goes off, they're just warping to how you feel about the card. The positive confirmation bias for the card is very real. Blasphemous Act has already gone over by Rust, so I'm not going to touch on it too much more. Fear of Resistance is one of those cards that needs to be evaluated based on when are you playing it, because if you're playing it on turn 2 and you're stopping your opponents from being able to develop their board as consistently, it's also going to prevent them from winning earlier. And that's good against almost every deck in the format. It's really good against Turbo, but depending on what your opponents are playing, there are definitely board states where playing a sphere or something can be very powerful. It does make your Magda cost more, but yeah. There's no consideration for Gloin over Gimli. Gloin requires basically that you're playing enough artifacts that like it changes how your tempo as to when you're dropping things. And sure, it gives you a treasure when you replay Magda, but for 3 mana, you can do that in a bunch of different ways. Mox Amber. This is something that turns on Mopal. It turns on for pushing your game plan forward after Magda is out. doesn't help recast Magda, but some of the cards that I am considering going down are more of the one-time fast mana, like Simian Spirit Guide or Lotus Petal, and this just stays on board. Like, even though there is downsides to it, it's 0 mana. Great Train Heist is something that can be revisited. It is a sort of I win the game situation, but personally, I don't like cards that basically force interaction from our opponents and potentially give the game to another player. So this is a card that you also need to politic into being like, hey, I'm not pushing for a win with these. I'm getting my treasures because of XYZ. And that I'm not going to actively be using these treasures unless I'm losing the game. Whether that means that you're winning on top of another win attempt or not. Cursed Mirror is something that you can consider, but it depends on how many artifact dwarves you're on, what your overall game plan is. This coming in as a copy of Bowmaster solves that problem. But there's very few creatures in the format where Cursed Mirror coming in as a copy of it does anything for a turn. So it's like Ranger Captain of Eos, Recruiter of the Guard, some of these other things that let you go and get creatures, but those are few and far between. So it's really like mostly the floor is 3 mana Strike It Rich that leaves an artifact in play afterward, or a mana rock in play afterward, which isn't terrible. But the ceiling is, potentially winning the game by copying your Roaming Throne in a board state that's just Roaming Throne Magda, right? You're not usually going to win with those 4 treasures. You need 6 in most of those scenarios to go off. Damping Sphere is a card that may come out, but right now it's still okay. I personally, in my test list, I don't play it. I don't think it's consistent enough, but that's neither here nor there. Delayed Blast Fireball is something to be revisited. There's still a lot of low toughness creatures, and it is a very good tempo play. But again, similar to Great Train Heist, it's going to be hard to convince your opponents to let it resolve. And then Chalice of the Void is an interesting one because Vexing Bauble has a lot of problems to it. And we're going to be going over why the draw part of the draw loop doesn't matter.
Yep.
And the fact that it turns off free interaction for your opponents isn't good in most situations. Where Chalice of the Void does not do that. It stops them from winning the game with anything having to do with LED, or a lot of lines with Kinnan, or anything with Hullbreaker Horror where they're trying to flicker things to make positive mana. Those sort of lines just become a lot harder unless Chalice gets bounced.
Yep.
And it
Stops
does
wins
just
better.
it depending on your variant of the build. If you're not on that many 0 mana rocks, then it doesn't affect you as much. So if you're on a build sort of like bosses, it is a lot better. And then this is sort of leading into the next thing that I want to discuss, and which is like where draw loops and winning the game actually intersect. Because the main cards that we have to do so are the One Ring in combination with either Sculpting Steel in certain loops to draw 1 card at a time, or just with Clock of Omens in other situations to help you draw through your deck. And then similarly, being able to draw or exile with Professional Facebreaker in situations where you know you're going to be casting specific things is all you really need as far as like game winning things. Because realistically, like, it's important to know how to draw through your deck, but it's not as important to know how to win after drawing your deck. You're not forced in a lot of situations to do so. You can, as long as you don't have Torpor Orb in play, you can still win with ETB effects of Twin Shot Sniper. So, like, you can use Roaming Throne and a copy of Roaming Throne, Sculpting Seal in most cases, so that Twin Shot Sniper will have 3 ETB effects when a Masquid Nexus is in play, or if you name, Goblin or whatever, so that way it can kill itself and then force itself into the graveyard while still dealing damage to an opponent with Barkform Harvester. So in those exact situations, you aren't casting any spells still. There's no need to draw your deck. You're just tutoring things in and out, right? And the situations where you're draw looping your deck don't really happen with Pyrite Spellbomb and Vexing Bauble or Academy Manufacturer, where it actually matters, because like Barkform Harvester's gone anyway. So you're forced to use Goblin Engineer as a way to loop Pyrite Spellbomb or Vexing Bauble. And again, unless specifically you need to win with Draw Loop, that's not necessary, because Engineer still wins with Twin Shot Sniper and Sculpting Steel, because you weld the Sculpting Steel in and out of the graveyard over and over again as a copy of Twin Shot Sniper.
Yep.
So again, as long as ETB effects aren't turned off, it's not a problem. And if they are, you can go and remove your Torpor Orb. So unless you specifically don't feel like it's safe to do so, draw looping into wins with Barkform Harvester and like Lightning Bolt or Twin Shot Sniper isn't necessarily like the way that you have to go about it. Because like if you're doing the Twin Shot Sniper line and someone goes, I'm going to exile your Barkform Harvester, you go, cool, I'm going to Lightning Bolt my own Twin Shot Sniper, and then I'm going to continue the loop. Or you go, I'm then going to tutor Dwarven Scorcher, deal 3 damage. I'm going to put it back in my deck with Barkform Harvester. Oh, I'm going to tutor it back out again, deal another damage to my Twin Shot, do that until it's dead, and then continue from there. So there's no point of interaction outside of split second that your opponents can deal with your loop.
Yep. And the only people that run split second cards that interact with our loop are Magda. So beware the mirror match.
Most situations, yes. So like the idea is that you want to layer your combos and not use your draw loop requirement for those wins unless you're forced to.
Yep.
Or unless you need to go get an answer for something else. So like that's why the ETB effects are so powerful, is because even though it does give, points of I can win on top of this, well, that's not the case, because we still have plenty of other options that we have available. Because we can go and grab our Plundering Barbarian to get rid of it. We can go and grab our whatever else we can draw. We have enough things, because once you have access to drawing at that point, you can go, okay, sudden shock it. Okay, cool. You can't interact there. I'm gonna put it back in my deck. Draw the sudden shock again. Then I'm gonna do it again. So like, there's a lot of things that you can do that don't necessarily require you to just go for drawing your deck.
Sorry, I just wanted to point something out. I don't think Sculpting and Twin Shot will work because Twin Shot is a 2/3. I tried to.
So you don't use Twin Shot Sniper. It doesn't go to the graveyard. It stays on the field. You use any
correct.
other artifact that are 3 or less.
So wait, sorry, I don't get it. You get Twin Shot to do the ETB 2 damage, and then
Which
Sculpting to do.
are you talking about, with Roaming Throne or without Roaming Throne? Like, are you
with
talking about the engineer line or what?
Yeah, no, with Roaming Throne. Like if you
Roaming
if you
Throne,
go,
Sculpting Steel is a copy of Roaming Throne. You now have
That's a-
3 ETBs. Twin Shot does 2 each ETB.
right.
4 of them go
Sorry,
to Twin Shot, 1 of them go to the opponent.
my bad. Yeah.
It's all good. It's one we haven't really talked a whole lot about until recently.
I'm probably going to make a video talking about layering your win cons.
Yeah, it's probably necessary. With all of our improved single tutor targets and lack of necessity for the draw loops. So let's.
I think that they're good to have, and
Yeah.
they're important for some win lines. Specifically, if you need to win with like return the favoring your GPS trigger, so you can win through the One Ring or something. But like outside of niche situations, they're definitely not required
Yeah,
unless your pieces have been used for other things.
which does come up, right?
It does.
That's probably the more likely scenario, honestly, that you've already used them in efforts of getting to infinite treasures.
Right.
Ready to go to the next?
Yep, we're ready to compare to Brandon's list. So the boss won the CCS tournament in Atlanta recently, going 5-0-3. So he plays a much Stax heavier build, which we have an entire podcast talking through some of the decisions that he made in his build making process, as well as decisions throughout the tournament. And there are some choices that obviously I don't agree with, like fetch lands and stuff. They're not necessary, and they don't really do a whole lot, even if they do technically remove cards. You know, you aren't gonna get oppoed for your land. It just doesn't make sense in most situations. Um, but his specific build looks to not get rid of cards. So he's not running Pyrokinesis. He's not running um, Chrome Mox. Instead, he's running um, Mox Diamond because he's comfortable with it being on actual 29 lands themselves. And that's perfectly fine. I still think that Mox Diamond has too many downsides mathematically, but it also depends on how you're approaching how you want to play the deck. Because if you're fishing for Magical Christmas Land in multiple different fashions, whether that's with Mox Diamond or Mishra's Workshop, or situations where you have like a turn 2 Tangle Wire or whatever with a turn 1 Magda. Like if those are the type of hands that you're pushing for, then it makes more sense to be playing things like Mox Diamond or whatever. But outside of those scenarios, it can still be problematic. Um, he was on Karn Mycosynth, but in our discussions, he said that Mycosynth wasn't good enough. Karn doesn't live long enough. Realistically, it's just not a strong combo at the moment, even in a hard stacks list. And that like the stacks pieces that do the most work are going to be Spear of Resistance, Thorn of Amethyst, and Trinosphere. Um, and like realistically, those cards can be very powerful, um, especially when you use them in conjunction with like Mycosynth Gardens. And that's another thing is that like Mycosynth Gardens can come in as a copy of Mox Diamond, and it will make colored mana. Whereas if you do it with Mox or Chrome Mox, it won't because doesn't have any imprinted thing. Um, so there's other things that you need to consider for things like that.
Also,
But
he's not on any of the FCs, so
nope.
his diamond numbers get. He's also not on Pyrokinesis at the moment, which that to me feels like Pyro's one of the better cards. Yeah, Pyro's one of the better cards for removal. It's very flexible, and not to say that running fewer red-faced cards is strictly better, but not running Pyro feels like.
And then he's on one extra artifact dwarf in Bloodline Pretender to try to do the whole thing of I'm going to present a win with one activation in the games that I'm going to win. But he said that he doesn't like Ragavan as much, so that would be coming out. Ubamask hasn't done as much for him, but Chalice of the Void as well has done a decent amount.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a different build compared to mine because obviously I'm on more interaction, not being on Untimely Malfunction or Sudden Shock or a lot of these other pieces that can deal with Oppo or Drannith Magistrate can be very problematic. There was no Torpor Orb. there's too many ETBs that are strong, but it was just something he was comfortable saying, okay, I'm going to make the other players deal with the Thoracle. And when you're on a harder stacks variant of the deck, Disruptor Flute becomes a little bit worse because you have other options to deal with specific win conditions, as far as layering them goes. But also on less vehicles, and again, just less interaction in general. No Siege Smash, no or less colorless lands, so no things like trying to do Talon Gates with Urza Saga. No Command Beacon, which to me is crazy. Especially with how many times Magda can die in a game. Making her cost 2 mana is very powerful.
Yep.
But there are kind of ways that we can make like a happy medium between the decks. So let's like talk about the differences between like why you might play specific versions of decks, and like why I sort of think that mid range is still ideal. We're still looking at blue green X and Esper X decks being the most present and well positioned in the format at the moment. And they cannibalize us a little bit more than we'd like. And they have more consistent access to value engines than most other decks. So it's a little bit harder for us to get ahead. Oh yeah, he did say that he is putting Torpor back in, right?
Yes, he did.
But that's not talking about what his deck is going to be changing into. It's talking about what his deck was when he won.
Yeah.
And without like putting into play spheres and stuff, like regardless, card draw is still king, and spheres do influence your opponent's ability to pay for Rhystic Study. And in this current meta, it's very creature heavy, and there are a lot of creature based win cons, so removal is king. And having more answers to the stacks pieces that stop us, like Bowmasters, Oppo, Draneth, etc., is going to be more important, in my opinion, in most situations than slowing your opponents down by like a turn or two. But it definitely gets a lot better when you think that you're going to be seeing faster decks, whether they're turbo or, mid-range that lean towards a more leaner, consistently early pushing win con. It's going to be a lot better for dealing with those. And having just a redundancy of things that can cause issues for common win cons like Breach can lead to sphere effects being very potent, right? So they're very strong, like probably 60% of the time, which is enough. And also, again, when you're playing for early hands like Boss's List does, and you're playing for your opening hand a lot more, Sphere in your opening hand is very strong, especially if you get it out early, because then it stops the development of your opponents, not just their win cons. And that can be very strong against things like Kinnan early, but it also puts you in a situation where they can pull ahead as well. So you have to be very careful when you are playing your stacks cards. So you have to be a very specific type of player for stacks to be strong for you, which is something that Brandon is. That's how he likes to play the deck, and he's very good at understanding board states and how those stacks pieces are going to stop the opponent from winning for XYZ deck, as well as how it can stop them from building their game plan.
I would say that my rubric on what makes a stacks card a good stacks card is how easy is it to break parity, how funky does it make sequencing from your opening hand, how good is it late, but most importantly, I think is does it both stop a win and stop development, or does it just do one of those two things? And I think that's where the sphere effects are doing well for him right now is specifically because it does both of those things. and the downside is the funkiness of the mulligans.
Yeah. So we have the next slide. And talking about like what does it actually tell us about the state of Magda, and the deck is still really deep, right? There's a variety of different play styles and different packages of cards that you can play and still succeed. Card stacks was not something that has done well, and Gustavo has still tried to play hard stacks Magda post ban, and it didn't work out for him too well. But clearly in this particular tournament, or depending on how your seeding goes with what decks you play against, your seat order, and all that stuff, it can matter a lot. But, Brandon didn't get first seat ever outside of his finals game. He was winning from seat 3 and seat 4 more often than not. Um, so that goes to show you that, sometimes stacks can still be powerful in those seat positions, but also that you're not guaranteed to see those cards every game. And sometimes you're just doing the normal Magda game plan, which is good enough in those seats where you're like, okay, well, it's not my job to police the table from seat 4. I'm just kind of pushing. And in those situations, being on 10 pieces of removal versus, 17 or 18 isn't that big of a difference, right? Because it's not really part of your game plan at that point, ideally. But going down on cards that do answer the Bowmasters, the Oppos, the Drannith and stuff is not great. So like, as far as like how these sort of the success of his deck translates to changes to what I suggest as baby's first Magda deck, so to speak, with the Magdanomicon. Um, it's not something that I currently suggest, but it's definitely cards that are on our watch list for like how they perform for other people, as well as something that I'm going to be testing in my own personal meta and my own personal test list to see what I think moving forward. Um, Cutting spine was a big deal, um, especially because it was just a ubiquitous answer to so many problems. But the deck is to the point where it's really hard to reason your way into playing it outside of it just being for comfort. And with as many downsides as it has, that's just not a good enough reason anymore.
Something I wanted to mention about Stax here build is the spaces in which it creates that inflection point for if the Stax resolves, now everyone's locked out and they've burned my creature, Magda. Those are the situations that I find the most troubling because sitting under these Stax pieces that keep us from winning the game are often are my favorite kind of Stax pieces because they often stop other people from winning the game, namely Oppo and lack of Totem, Curse Totem. Those two are the ones that I'm happy sitting under because I will eventually, or incidentally, have an answer for those cards that I'm not going to use it immediately because it doesn't benefit me to be out from under it until I'm about to win, and therefore I get to do my Magda thing without much reprisal. I'm not in the 3v1 even if I have more than 5 treasures because I can't win, and that's a pretty good spot to be in. But when you consider these like drop the stacks on the table and hope the table can't break out of it. One, you are the 3v1. You are forcing that inflection point, and you spent cards and sculpted your game plan around doing it. And if they do get out from under it, or worse, they kill you and kill your Magda in response to it, you're very likely to not have a good time that game. And I find the mid range just kind of grind on the existing understacks that your opponents plays is pretty good right now. I'd rather be in those situations than trying to create the lock and our opponent's not able to get out of it.
But there's still probably that happy medium where you're taking some of the things that do influence those early hands, like the Sphere of Resistance, the Thorn of Amethyst, depending on the pods, etc. Where there are some things that you can realistically remove when doing so, like Disruptor Flute, etc.
I like deflip
So.
way too much to remove it. It's
Yeah, I mean, like right now in my list, the stuff that I think are actually flex slots are things like, the one extra vehicle that I'm going up, Mobile Garrison, Disruptor Flute, Damping Sphere, Lotus Petal, Simian Spirit Guide, depending on the situation, Metallic Mimic, because depending on how Lifecraft Engine plays out, we might not need extra artifact dwarves. Pyroblast and Red Blast because of the stuff that Rust was talking about. It depends on your local meta. I mean, I can't really afford to get rid of them. It's caused, or they've allowed me to deal with Gilded Drakes so well that it's something that I'm kind of stuck playing locally. And yeah, I mean, otherwise, you have Mirror of the Forebears, which is technically cuttable in lists that are on more artifact dwarves than not, and also where they are playing Cursed Mirror, but you still need ways to win without Clock of Omens, and one of those lines does require, at least 2 copies of each thing. So Mirror of the Forebears being able to make that copy of Zorn is very important.
So I think that's the end of our presentation. I wanted to throw it out to the crowd. If someone wants to talk through their question or conversation topic, feel free to throw your hand up. You can do that by pressing the hand icon in the top right. I think it's on mobile desktop. Or you can type your question up in the chat on the right, and we'll read it out, and then we'll answer it. Either way is fine by me. We'll probably give it until around 2 o'clock even to see if we have any questions, and then we'll probably press on with our day. Yeah, I don't think we have anything else aside from that.
Not really.
Oh man,
just your stuff for scrimmage pods that don't
we don't do
really
anymore.
happen much.
Yeah,
we don't have
actually
time.
play again today. It's only 2 o'clock.
It is only 2 o'clock. I have to go pick up my cards after this, but when I get home, I'll probably be looking to play.
I can show everyone the bear. Mostly just because I need to have a second deck to play, so people can play Magda.
I'm headed to bed, but thanks everyone. See ya.
Later.
Night, buddy. I will riff and talk about Lumra for about 5 minutes, though. So,
I'm going to cut you off right here and wait until we're done with the podcast to talk about Lumra.
That's funny. Well, we are waiting for anyone that has a question, but I don't think anyone's typing, so I think
it's been 2 minutes and no one's typed.
Yeah,
I think we're safe.
Yep. All right, so I do want to talk about the Scrimmage Pod best practices because it's always relevant. Try to practice with one Magda or pod when you're practicing. Sometimes you can even have a second Magda because those mirror matches are becoming more and more common because we are Legion. Trade off Magda as often as you can. The best way to learn Magda is to beat Magda and play Magda, but the second best way is to beat Magda. Play at the highest level of competition, the competitive rel that you're comfortable with and your playgroup's comfortable with. Try to do as little take backsies as possible, but do not hold yourself to not taking back plays that where no action or no information was gained, because you actually need to be able to use that in comp REL of taking back plays when someone politics around it or politics you or you're politicking them. Those are important things to be able to do and be comfortable trying to do. And if you just say, "Oh, no take backsies ever," you're going to be in a position where you're not comfortable lobbying for them. mulligans. Discuss your mulligans with the table. Discuss your mulligans with the people on the server. You will get better information with that. Reveal information as necessary. It is useful when you're holding up the three-way draw situation to have select information shown to the table. And play for 75, 80-minute rounds. I don't think there's a whole lot of value in playing out games that are like 2 hours long because you didn't win that. That was a draw. It can be fun, but it's not going to make you better at winning within regulation. Also, goldfish your lines. Know your lines. Don't get to infinite treasures and be like, crap, how does this version of the deck win? Because you can very much do that, and the more brain drained you are in a tournament, the likely you're going to get to clock roaming throne and be like, crap, do I go for one ring things? Like, you don't want to be in that position. You want to reduce the amount of the number of ways in which you can punch your win because you forgot how your line works. And call it slow play, even in casual. That's all I got on that, and I think that puts us right at the end.
Yeah.
Remember, all of you that stuck around the entire time, you really are the real treasures.
I'm gonna strangle you.
So, it's funny because Bobby is sick right now, so I don't know if that's like in reaction to me or if he's just having a moment.
I hope it's in reaction to you.
Oh, it definitely was. I just want everyone to know that the entire server's like existence is me trying to force more memes, jokes, and fluffy garbage, and they're just like, no, we can just make it normal. And they have to fight me. They have to pull me back from the ledge.
Yep.
But anyway, thanks for coming, everyone. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Go crush some people at your LGS. No slow play.